Chapter 439. When the incident happened on the street, Xiao Xian and the rest had not gone far. They heard the commotion. Even though they couldn't see clearly what happened, Black Bear and Mao Da could guess based on their past experience. "I think a mammoth ran past," said Mao Da. He heard the sound of elephants just now, but it stopped after a while. The city guards would not let them rampage around the city and cause destruction. "Thank goodness we left quickly or we would have been affected." Then, Black Bear remembered what Xiao Xian said before they left the shop. His eyes darted towards Xiao Xian, deep in thought. In the past, Mao Da would have gone to watch, but compared to the Gongjia family, the commotion here was not as interesting. Let's go to the Gongjia residence." "Right, where does Gongjia Heng live?" Mao Da was curious. He returned to the royal city late, so he only found out about Gongjia Heng through private conversations with the people who stayed in the royal city. "I've been there before." Black Bear pointed and walked in front to lead the way. Most of the Gongjia family members lived in one place in the royal city, surrounded by a large wall. Although there were others who lived elsewhere, there were fewer of them. However, because there were so many people, there were doors in all four directions of the Gongjia residence's wall. Actually, they did not have to worry about not finding the right door. Because of Gongjia Heng, there were many people outside. No matter how big the Gongjia residence was, they just had to ask around to find out where it was. "What, you're going to watch the sword test too?" asked a passerby who knew Black Bear. Black Bear did not say much. If he said they were going to look for Gongjia Heng, they would definitely be pestered. When they arrived, Xiao Xian saw many people before they even saw the door. Some were here to test the sword while others were here to watch. Sigh, he failed again. The sword is broken, he has no chance at all. He can't even compare to the previous one. But how many failed today? 21, but only one succeeded. I didn't see him, but I heard that he was from the Feng clan of the 6th division. The surrounding people were discussing among themselves. Someone squeezed out from the crowd, looking dejected. He was even being pointed at by the people around him. Obviously, this was the person who had failed the sword test. So many people. Xiao Xian sighed as he looked at the crowd that had filled the door. There aren't that many now. "There were more people when Gongjia Heng came back," said Black Bear. Heng, who had been away for 20 years, returned from Gongjia Mountain. The Gongjia family's jaws dropped. Back in the day, Gongjia Heng wasn't a genius. He wasn't even ranked in the Gongjia family. When Gongjia Heng left for Gongjia Mountain, many people didn't think highly of him. Every year, many people had the same idea, but after they left, they never came back. Very few succeeded and they were all very intelligent people. Gongjia Heng was just an ordinary person. Going to Gongjia Mountain was suicide. Unfortunately, not only did Gongjia Heng come back alive, he even managed to learn the skills left behind by the best craftsmen of Gongjia Mountain. Not just the Gongjia family, even the royal city was in an uproar. Many people came to ask for weapons. The aristocrats loved swords, so many people came to ask for swords. However, Gongjia Heng's status was high enough that he dared to be rude to the aristocrats of the 6th division. There were too many people here and Gongjia Heng was impatient. He came up with this sword test. Only those who passed would be registered and qualified to talk to Gongjia Heng. Otherwise, they would all be blocked outside. The so-called sword test was actually a test where Gongjia Heng prepared some large rocks and placed them outside the door. Then, he placed some weapons on top of the rocks. If anyone could use these weapons to cut through the rocks without damaging the weapons, they would pass. If the weapons were chipped, they would have failed, much less broken weapons. This was actually a test of one's ability. Gongjia Heng had specially selected the quality of the weapons and rocks. If one was strong enough, they would be able to cut through the rocks without damaging the weapons. Even if the rocks were not broken, as long as they met the standards and the weapons were not damaged, they would be included in the list. To most people, these conditions were too harsh and difficult. However, they could understand. Many people even thought that this was how it should be. After all, Gong Jiaheng was a master, how could he just casually make weapons for others? After the test was set up, many people came to try. However, as more and more people failed, fewer people came out to try. They were not afraid of failure. They were afraid of breaking their weapons and not being able to ask Gong Jiaheng for weapons in the future. They might even be ostracized by the Gongjia family's craftsmen. Many of the Gongjia family's craftsmen and apprentices followed Gong Jiaheng's footsteps closely. This was called the idol effect. When Gong Jiaheng said that he would not make weapons for anyone in the future, the craftsmen and apprentices who followed him would do the same. When Xiao Xian and the other three arrived, they happened to see a swordsman who broke his copper knife while chopping a rock. He was disqualified immediately and Gong Jiaheng would not make weapons for them in the future. That was why the swordsman looked so defeated. In the future, if he wanted to ask the Gongjia family to make weapons, he would have to ask the craftsmen and apprentices who did not follow Gong Jiaheng. Black Bear opened up a path in front like an armored car, forcefully pushing the crowd aside as he walked in. Xiao Xian and the other two followed behind. The people who were pushed aside by Black Bear wanted to scold him, but when they turned around and saw Black Bear, they shut their mouths. No matter what, only those with power had the right to speak. Some of the people standing on the outer layer did not dare to say, Black Bear. When they saw Black Bear pass by, they wanted to take the opportunity to squeeze forward. However, they did not expect that as soon as they moved forward, they were squeezed out. One was fine, but they were squeezed out 3 times in a row. Who else wants to try? Shouted someone in the crowd. Hurry up, I still have to go home for dinner after this. I'm starving, complained someone else. It was as if they were watching a show but the show never happened. When they saw Black Bear squeeze in, many people's eyes lit up and they perked up. Perhaps this muscular man could put on a good show. Black Bear really wanted to try. He had only been scouting and observing for the past few days. Now that he had brought Xiao Xian here, he wanted to give it a try. Even if he failed, perhaps he could use Xiao Xian's connection to change Gong Jiaheng's mind. It was no wonder he was not confident. In the past, he had only chopped people and vegetables. When had he ever chopped rocks? After making up his mind, Black Bear said to Xiao Xian, "Wait here, I'm going to try." Just as Black Bear was about to go over, a man dressed in a linen gray robe squeezed in from the other side of the crowd. His hair was simply tied behind his head with a cloth strip. His face was expressionless, and he looked quiet and inconspicuous. While Black Bear was talking to Xiao Xian, the man had already squeezed through the crowd towards the rock. Since he had taken the lead, Black Bear could only wait behind. This made the leader of the trade caravan a little unhappy. The man in gray looked at the weapons on the table next to him. There were knives, swords, axes and so on. He picked up his sword and without much preparation, walked up to the rock and slashed at it. It was the size of a winter melon. There was no technique involved. It was a simple slash, but the moment it slashed down, it gave people a sense of sharpness. Clang! There was a deep mark on the rock, but it did not break. Looking at the man's sword, there was a shallow dent. The onlookers booed. No one knew if they were regretting or gloating. The man in front of the rock did not care about the crowd's reaction. He just held the sword horizontally and brushed his fingers across the sword. He looked at the dent on the sword with deep affection, as if he wanted to imprint it deeply into his heart. Then he looked at the deep mark on the rock. He held the sword with both hands and bowed to the door with a solemn expression, "I've learned something." After he finished speaking, the man in gray put down the sword and turned to leave without any reluctance. His lonely back was like the wandering swordsman in the old stories. The onlookers were astonished by the other party's reaction. "Wait, this warrior, what did you understand after you slashed the stone? Why did you look like you understood the true meaning of this place? Why don't we find a place to drink and talk about life? Some onlookers followed up to ask. Unfortunately, the unknown man still did not speak. His back was straight like a sword as he walked away quickly in the autumn wind. Could he be a master? The masters in the world always had different ideas. They could not be understood. Maybe he would become a famous swordsman in the future. Some people thought. However, Black Bear did not pay attention to the person who left. Seeing that another person had failed, he was nervous. What kind of weapon do you think I should choose? Sword. I heard the Gongjia family makes more swords. Maybe that sword will be stronger than other weapons, said Mao. Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian. Use whatever weapon you're used to. When you slash, just treat it as if it's a ferocious beast that's about to kill you. Don't think about anything else, said Xiao Xian. Black Bear nodded. Xiao Xian's thoughts were the same. He should use whatever weapon he was used to. His favorite weapon was still the axe. On the other side, the guards outside the door had changed the rock. Every time, the rock was different but the material was the same. Just as Black Bear was about to go over, Xiao Xian whispered something to him. Black Bear's eyes lit up and he nodded. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the bear-like leader of the caravan picked up an axe. He weighed it in his hand and flicked the blade of the axe with his finger. He had a rough understanding of the axe. He did not know much about rocks but he had used many weapons. He knew this much. Thinking about Xiao Xian's words, Black Bear did not face the rock directly like the others. Instead, he moved slightly to the side and looked at Xiao Xian. Seeing Xiao Xian nod, Black Bear took a deep breath and focused. He emptied his mind and imagined himself leading a group of merchants out on a journey when a ferocious beast suddenly charged at them. In this critical moment, without hesitation, he roared, raised his arm holding the axe and swung it down heavily. As he swung the axe, Black Bear's eyes were filled with cold murderous intent. The crowd shuddered at his murderous aura. Bam! Unlike the previous sword tests, the crisp sound this time was especially clear. The rock split in half and the axe was deeply embedded in the wood below. The crowd was silent for a moment, then exploded. The crowd was even more anxious than Black Bear. Quick, pick it up and see. See if there's a chip on the axe. The coldness in Black Bear's eyes dissipated. He came back to his senses and was now nervous. He pulled the axe out of the wood and looked at the blade. His face lit up with excitement. No chip. There's no chip. Ha, boss. You did it. Mao ran over excitedly, rubbing his hands and wanting to try too. Xiao Xian also went over to congratulate him. Get lost if you're done. A cold voice rang out. It stood out among the excited crowd. Black Bear's joy was dampened by this. He stopped smiling and looked over with a straight face. Then he snorted. I was wondering who it was. So it's from the Linlu tribe. Linlu tribe? Xiao Xian knew about this tribe because the person driving the carriage to the Ji residence yesterday was from the Linlu tribe. It was said that they were riding on the Ji family's coattails and had become a new noble family in the royal city. Chapter 440. 10 people squeezed through the crowd. Judging from their attire, they seemed to be together. However, these people's attire was a little strange. They had the wildness of the tribesmen, but they also wore conspicuous silk clothes like the nobles in King City. When paired together, they wore eye-catching silk clothes with reflective patterns on the inside, and a sleeveless brownish-yellow animal skin short coat on the outside. The group of 10 stood out, not only because of their attire, but also because of the tall man in the middle. Xiao Xian and the rest of the Yanjia were already tall compared to most people. Black Bear's tribe was slightly taller than most Yanjia people. However, Black Bear's tribe was built so they looked especially intimidating. But now, in front of that person, Black Bear was obviously a lot shorter. The man's arms were as thick as stone pillars. He stood out in the crowd like a crane among chickens, half a body taller. Not only was he tall, but he was also very strong. Standing in front of such a person was like standing in front of the thick and solid city walls outside the royal city. Such a big guy, those who were timid would be afraid just by looking at him. Who knew if he would crush or injure the people next to him if he fell? Some people wondered. Some guessed the man's identity. Those who were quick on the uptake had guessed from Black Bear's words. Linlu tribe. Lu family. That big man can't be Lubi, right? Some people speculated. Lubi? The one rumored to be able to kill a bear with one hammer? Someone exclaimed. When they heard, kill a bear with one hammer, Black Bear and Mauda raised their eyebrows. Their displeasure deepened. What were they talking about? Hearing this under these circumstances, they felt like something was wrong. It sounded like a provocation. They were extremely annoyed. So that's what Lubi looks like. Some people were still discussing, their voices excited and a little regretful. They were excited to finally see him in person, but regretful because he was a little disappointing. Lubi was known as the most talented person in the Linlu tribe in the past few hundred years. It was said that he was tall and naturally strong. For this reason, the Linlu tribe even asked the Ji family to make him a big bronze hammer. Rumor had it that Lubi could kill a giant bear with one strike of his hammer. Because the Linlu tribe had moved to the royal city citizens were all talking about it. In order to make themselves known, the Lu family naturally spread the news of all the outstanding talents in the tribe. Lubi's name was naturally known by everyone. The citizens of the royal city wanted to see what Lubi looked like. Was he like a demonic beast, with one arm like an elephant's leg, holding a huge hammer the size of a house, and creating a pool with each step? It was a pity that he hadn't seen Lubi before. The Lu family hadn't completely moved in yet. But now, everyone knew that the main members of the Lu family had moved to the royal city. The person in front of them, who was much taller than Black Bear, Baimi, was the legendary Lubi. Although it was a little different from what they had imagined, there were still some similarities with the rumors. It was enough for the people of the royal city, who lacked entertainment, to talk about it for a long time. Lubi's long-handled hammer had a jujube-shaped head. There were some dents of varying depths on it, signs of battle. No one knew if they were left behind by humans or beasts. No matter what, one look at the hammer and you knew this person wasn't easy to deal with. Although Lubi's hammer wasn't as big as a house, it could be used as an umbrella. Wielding such a solid hammer wasn't an easy task, much less using it as a weapon. As Lubi and the rest walked over, Xiao Xian, Guang Yi and the rest, who were considered strong, now looked skinny and weak compared to Lubi. Of course, the onlookers, including the Linlu tribesmen, were even weaker compared to Lubi. They were as thin as firewood. However, the one who spoke wasn't Lubi. Instead, it was a relatively gentle-looking young man who was walking at the front. The young man's gaze was always cold and mocking. Coupled with his words, he seemed a little arrogant. When Black Bear mentioned Linlu tribe, these people were unhappy. The young man walking at the front looked at Black Bear coldly. To them, the word tribe sounded too rustic. Now, everyone was imitating the aristocrats of the 6 tribes. They no longer called themselves tribesmen, but changed their surname to a family and worked hard to become aristocrats. In the royal city, when greeting or introducing themselves, most people would say X or XX. Who would say XX tribe? It wasn't easy for the Linlu tribe to change into what it was today. Now they were being mocked. A merchant is a merchant. You have no aspirations. Vulgar. The young man's cold face was 3 parts mocking and 7 parts arrogant. Black Bear narrowed his eyes. Yes, you have aspirations. I heard the Linlu tribesmen are rushing to the royal city to be slaves. Perfect, the grains in the fields outside the royal city are all ripe. They need people to harvest them. Maybe in a few days, you'll have work to do. The pay isn't low either. It'll be enough for you to eat 1 or 2 meals. There were sparks in the air, as if they could explode with just a touch. The voices of the onlookers quieted down, but no one left. Those who left soon came back, bringing their friends and relatives to watch. One was to see Luby, and the other was to see if a fight would break out. They couldn't miss this opportunity. On one side were the Black Bears and on the other was the Lu family of the Linlu tribe, who had just moved to the royal city. There were only 4 people on one side and 10 on the other. If they really fought, who would win? Some people were already guessing and betting. The people outside even gathered to place their bets. What, are you here to test your swords too? Do you have the guts? Do you have the ability? Black Bear asked. The young man at the front raised his chin. That's right. He took a step towards the sword-testing rock and looked at the crowd. Looming of the Lu family, I'm here to test my swords. Someone next to Looming walked out. Lupin of the Lu family, I'm here to test my swords. Luby, who was carrying a large hammer, grinned, revealing his white teeth. Luby of the Lu family, I'm here to test my swords. 10 people announced their names in a row. It didn't seem like they were announcing their names for the sword testing, more like they were announcing their names for the people around them. They were just showing off. You Black Bears, if you're done, then get lost. If you're not done, then get lost. It's our turn now. Looming looked at Black Bear. Black Bear was so angry that his fur was about to explode. He hated it when people shouted at him. If it was any other place, he would have pulled out his saber and slashed at him, just like yesterday on the dirt road outside the city. However, this was the Gongjia family's doorstep. He had just tested his swords and had the right to ask Gongjia Heng to make him a weapon. What if Gongjia Heng got angry and rejected him? Was he going to waste such a great opportunity for a few henchmen? Black Bear did not want to. Besides, Black Bear had brought Xiao Xian and the rest here. He did not want to drag Xiao Xian into this. He still needed to rely on Xiao Xian to go to Jeju tomorrow. If Xiao Xian was injured, tomorrow's plan would be scrapped. Black Bear suppressed his anger. His expression darkened as he glared at the Linlu tribe. It was as if he had flung a knife at them. Unfortunately, the people from the Linlu tribe didn't care at all. Xiao Xian watched the Linlu tribesman's actions from the side. He had an idea. These 10 people were not here to test their swords. Or rather, they were here to test their swords, but after seeing Black Bear, they changed their minds and targeted the 4 of them. At first, Xiao Xian thought some idiot did not recognize Black Bear after Black Bear had tested his swords. But now, it seemed like these people clearly recognized Black Bear. From the looks of it, all of their actions and words were done on purpose to provoke Black Bear. No, Xiao Xian often hunted in the forest, so he was very sensitive to changes in the aura of humans and beasts. He could feel that these people did not come with good intentions. The Linlu tribesmen really wanted to fight. Xiao Xian was right. This was Looming's plan. Initially, he wanted to test his sword, but when he realized the Black Bears were here, he changed his mind. The Black Bears only had 4 people and there were no other Black Bears around. The Lu family, on the other hand, had 10 people. This was a rare opportunity. In a place like Monarch City, no, not only Monarch City, it was the same everywhere. In order to gain a foothold, one had to display one's strength. And in order to display one's strength to the people around, the best way to gain a foothold in such a new place was to find a stepping stone. That was the rule. The stepping stone could not be too small or it would be unstable. It could not be too big or it would have the opposite effect. That was why Looming had his eyes on Black Bear, who was testing his swords. Black Bear was famous and he was not a noble in the royal city. He was the perfect stepping stone. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with a strange light. His earlier provocation seemed impulsive, but in fact, he had a motive. When they came over, they had already planned it out. As long as they followed the plan, Black Bear would be their stepping stone. Fixed. Fixed. Lupin and the rest were still provoking him. Mao Da was already angry. Although he knew they were provoking him, if he continued to tolerate it in front of so many people, where would the dignity of the Black Bears go? Where would the tribe's honor be? Black Bear raised his hand and gestured for Xiao Xian and the rest to stand behind him. He drew his large copper knife. Since you want to die, I'll reward you. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. He waved his hand and the other 9 people beside him moved. The 10 of them split into 4 groups and charged forward in a 3-3-1 formation. Everyone thought that the first to face Black Bear would be the tallest Lubi from the Linlu tribe. He had the highest chance of taking on Black Bear. But no one expected Lubi to charge at Xiao Xian alone with his large hammer. It was just like the strategy used by predators who lived in groups in the wild when they were hunting. They would first scatter the prey and then pick the old, weak, sick, and disabled to eat. Bullying with numbers. Despicable and shameless. No, there was no such thing here. They called it a strategic encirclement. Sometimes, even if both sides were balanced at the start, the moment the balance was broken, things would get out of hand. And from the perspective of nature's strategy, the easiest way to break the balance would be to start from the weakest point. In the plan of the 10 people from the Linlu tribe, it was easy to pick the weakest of the 4 targets. Black Bear was out of the question. Mao Da was the second in command. He would not be weak. Eliminate again. Of the remaining 2, the older one had a murderous look in his eyes. He was not to be trifled with. Eliminate again. Only 1 was left. This young man did not look like much. He should be the weakest of the 4. Didn't you see Black Bear blocking for him? He was the one. Chapter 441. Without saying a word, Lu Ming and the others unleashed their totemic power. Within a short period of time, they were almost at their peak. Surging power seeped out of their pores, and the air around them surged. Even people standing a little further away could feel the power radiating from them. Among the 10 of them, 7 of them were advanced totemic warriors. As for the remaining 3, although they were slightly weaker, they cooperated well and were not a burden. Instead, they were able to contribute their own strength, waiting for the right moment to deliver a fatal blow. Black Bear, Mao Da and Guang Yi had 2 advanced totemic warriors and 1 intermediate totemic warrior in front of them. They worked well together too. They would not believe that their opponents were not prepared. Guang Yi wanted to block for Xiao Xian, but he was surrounded by 3 people. He was furious. Without thinking, he drew his bronze sword and met their swords head-on. The collision of the tyrannical power and the sound of the blades colliding was like a thunderclap. Guang Yi sensed that something was wrong. There was a chip on the edge of his sword. Back then, when Gong Jiaheng visited the Flaming Horn tribe, he had given them 10 weapons. However, Guang Yi did not accept them because he did not like them. Plus, he wanted to leave them for the younger members of the tribe so he could use his own. When he came here with Xiao Xian, Duo Kong also wanted to give his sword to Guang Yi, but Guang Yi rejected him. Duo Kong still had to lead the team back and it would be dangerous. He was with Xiao Xian and the Black Bears so there would not be too much trouble. That was why Guang Yi was only carrying a sword he picked up in the morning. It was a normal sword. He heard that many people in the royal city carried swords, so Guang Yi picked a random one. He was not used to using anything anyway. His old machete had broken and he could not make a new one. Later on, he used a sword but he was not used to it. Xiao Xian had said that when he came to the royal city, he would see if he could get a new machete from Gong Jiaheng for Guang Yi. He did not expect this to happen before he even met Gong Jiaheng. The opponent's weapon was obviously of higher quality. Guang Yi's normal sword might not last long. Guang Yi would not be able to get rid of them. Guang Yi sensed that something was wrong, and so were his opponents. Guang Yi's opponent felt as if he had bumped into a bull. The recoil numbed his entire arm, and even his bones were trembling. Indeed, it was the right decision not to pick this person. If Lu Bi fought this person, he might not be able to finish him off quickly. Although he was not easy to deal with, the Linlu tribesmen were secretly pleased with their strategy. Black Bear and Mao Da would not be able to win in a short amount of time. They would not be able to take care of Xiao Xian. Lu Ming smirked. This was all within his expectations. Black Bear's men were indeed very strong. If they had enough time or good weapons, the 10 of them might not be able to defeat them. But according to the plan, Lu Ming believed that Lu Bi would be able to defeat them in one hit. With 4-1, Black Bear's side would be left with 3. As for the Lu family, it would be 10 against 3. If they couldn't defeat Black Bear, they would let Lu Bi do it. With their cooperation, they wouldn't lose no matter what. On the other side, Lu Bi's body flashed. His tall and muscular body was not as clumsy as it looked. Instead, he was unusually agile. The muscles in his legs expanded, propelling his body forward. He charged towards Xiao Xian like a cannonball. His target was clear. He did not even look at the others. In the blink of an eye, Lu Bi was in front of Xiao Xian. The hammer he swung seemed to have sealed off Xiao Xian's escape routes. Xiao Xian was completely enveloped in the shadow of the hammer. There was nowhere to run. Lu Bi was hailed as the only prodigy of the Linlu tribe in hundreds of years. He was not someone who only had strength and no skills. Clang! The sound of metal clashing reverberated in the surroundings. The power that was released permeated the air and spread out, causing the surrounding people to tremble. It was as if Lu Bi's heavy hammer had not hit the people standing there, but their hearts. Xiao Xian gripped the hilt of his sword with one hand and supported himself with the other. He used the blade to block the hammer. His feet stepped on the ground. The ground around him seemed to shake from the force of the impact. Spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the ground. The earth and rocks on the ground were shattered by this tremor, and like a backflow of rain, they flew up high from the ground. The web between Xiao Xian's thumb and index finger split open, blood dripping onto the ground. However, this block had stopped the hammer. He blocked it. Lu Bi's eyes flashed with shock. He did not hesitate. He retracted his hammer and charged again, directly at Xiao Xian. Like a bolt from a crossbow, the air in front of him was shattered. Under Yang Guang's attack, the golden blade reflected a dazzling light, leaving a trail of light in the air. Clang! The sound of metal clashing was so loud it seemed like it was going to explode everyone's eardrums. The turbulence in the air was visible to the naked eye. Their vision seemed to be distorted. The sword in Xiao Xian's hand blocked the incoming hammer head-on. In order to block the hammer, Xiao Xian took a few steps back. The violent force transmitted to the ground beneath his feet. The already cracked ground could no longer withstand the force. Everywhere Xiao Xian's feet passed, there was a continuous rumble. Pieces of the ground collapsed. The depressions connected to each other, forming a long pit. The earth, rocks, and debris were sent flying high into the air, scattering in all directions. The area between the thumb and forefinger of his hands that were already injured was torn apart by this attack. The original wound widened, and new wounds appeared around it. With so many wounds extending all the way to his wrist, the bright red blood was especially conspicuous on the golden blade. Large droplets of blood dripped down to the ground. He blocked it again. The surrounding people's mouths were wide open. They looked like they were about to swallow an eagle's egg. This time, Lu Bi was no longer shocked. He was terrified. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the weakest of the 4, who had been carefully selected, would actually be so powerful. Compared to himself, the young man looked much weaker. How could he block his attacks twice? Lubi looked at the young man who was only a short distance away from him. He saw the totemic patterns on his body that looked like burning flames. He was definitely not from the Black Bears. Who was he? Lubi saw the other party smiling at him. That smile seemed to contain endless murderous intent. Seeing this smile, Lubi felt the hairs on his back stand up. A chill ran down his spine and rushed to his head. Before Lubi could react, a strong force came from the hammer handle. He couldn't help but increase the force of his stomp on the ground. The force from the hammer handle was still increasing. He had no time to prepare. Steady. He had to steady. He couldn't stand. The rocks and soil on the ground creaked and rolled backward. He was retreating. He couldn't stand properly. He was being forced back. Lubi's eyebrows twitched, his eyes filled with disbelief. His grip on the hammer handle was getting more and more sore. However, this power was still rising rapidly. Xiao Xian's totemic power was surging wildly. Ever since the trip to Gongjia Mountain, he had realized that his totemic power was surging. Increase, increase. Power. Even more power. The power in his muscles, meridians, bones, and even flowing blood was stimulated to a greater extent in order to explode with their fiercest attacks. Xiao Xian's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Lubi didn't dare look him in the eye. Lubi's muscles were trembling. He wanted to block, but he couldn't. Instead, he retreated even faster. His feet, which were rooted to the ground, could only grind against the ground. The ground cracked, and the broken pieces of soil and stones were sent flying by Lubi's heels. A trench was plowed into the ground, and the trench was still expanding at an accelerated rate. Lubi could only feel a burning pain on his feet. It was the result of grinding on the ground. Lubi had the illusion that he wasn't facing a person, but an awakening beast. This beast was roaring as if it was trying to break the seal, and he was facing the beast's roar head-on. The people around him were like statues. Other than the people who were blocking Lubi's path of retreat, the rest of the spectators stood in the same position, their eyes almost popping out of their sockets. When the energy in his body reached its peak, Xiao Xian's arms shook violently. He used his sword to lift the hammer, then reached out with his free hand to grab it. Suddenly, Lubi felt a burning pain in his hands that were holding the hammer. His shoulder joints made cracking sounds and his hands were empty. He didn't even have time to react before the hammer was snatched away by the other party. Lubi wanted to snatch it back, but there was a flash of golden light. It was so sharp that his neck was about to be severed. He had no choice but to retreat. Xiao Xian sheathed his sword and weighed the hammer in his hand. Since it was made for Lubi, the handle was thicker so Lubi could hold it. However, Xiao Xian couldn't wrap his hand around it, but he could still hold it in his hand. Xiao Xian looked at Lubi, who was gasping for air, his face full of shock. Then, without hesitation, he charged forward with his hammer. The battle here also attracted quite a number of people over. How could they not be here for something so interesting? Who's fighting who? Someone who didn't know what was going on asked. One side is from the Lu family, the other side. Who's the other side? That kid's totem doesn't look like he's from the Black Bears. You mean the Lu family? The Lu family from the Linlu tribe that just came to the royal city? Someone who was interested in the Lu family asked. The Lu family from the Linlu tribe? Rumor has it that Lubi wields a huge hammer. Could the one with the hammer be the legendary Lubi from the Lu family? The person who explained choked. No, Lubi, he's the one being chased by the hammer. Chapter 442. That's Lubi. The royal city citizens who had run over to watch the show were shocked. The guards at the entrance of the Gongjia family were shocked too. The Linlu tribesmen who were fighting Black Bear and the rest were so shocked their legs turned to jelly. Lu Ming had felt that something was amiss earlier. When he and the other two were blocking Black Bear, they had focused all their attention on Black Bear. They didn't dare to be careless when facing Black Bear, so he couldn't see what was happening on Luby's side. However, he believed that things would go according to his plan. However, when they first clashed, the sound was different from what he expected. Confusion flashed across his eyes, but he did not think much of it. What happened next stunned them. If it wasn't for Luby, they might not have chosen Black Bear. They had always believed that Luby would be able to stop Black Bear after taking care of the weakest one. However, who would have thought that the first target they chose for Luby would ruin all their plans? What happened to the hammer? How did this happen? If they could not even take care of the first person, who would stop Black Bear? While he was thinking, Looming was careless and was almost cut in half by Black Bear's heavy sword. He hurriedly raised his sword to block the attack. The force from the sword almost broke his arms. It was indeed a terrifying force. Black Bear was also strong. His sword slashed down, putting them under a lot of pressure. They could not stop him. Although he dodged the sword, Looming could not avoid a kick to his chest. He flew backwards, spitting out blood. When he landed, his legs were weak and he fell to the ground. On the other side, there was another loud bang. Rocks and dirt fell to the ground like raindrops. Xiao Xian held the long bronze hammer, watching Luby roll away like a gourd. Luby, who had finally stopped, ignored the pain in his body. His eyes were still filled with shock as he stared at the young man standing there. This was the first target of the Linlu tribe's plan. He never thought that his hammer would be taken away by someone else. And this person seemed to be doing it more easily than him. The muscles on Luby's face were trembling. His face was cut by the flying stones. Blood and dirt flowed out of the wounds, making him look extremely miserable. The others wanted to help Luby, but they were stopped by Black Bear and the other two. Seeing that Looming was sent flying, the other Linlu tribesmen immediately retreated and gathered with the injured Looming and Luby. Just now, they had seen the Lu clan's people in the vicinity. They should have gone to call for reinforcements by now. This made them feel embarrassed, but at the same time, they were relieved. With reinforcements coming, Black Bear wouldn't be able to do anything to them. Guang Yi took the chipped sword and stood beside Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's performance just now made Guang Yi very happy and proud. He thought to himself, as expected of an elder. I should let these people know the consequences of offending the Yanjiao tribe. Do they think the Yanjiao people are easy to bully? Seeing that Xiao Xian was fine, Black Bear turned to look at the Linlu tribesman with a strange expression and smacked his lips. Black Bear knew what the Linlu tribesmen were up to. His rugged face sneered as he looked at Looming and the others. How blind are you guys to pick on that kid? Idiots. However, Xiao Xian did help Black Bear. If it wasn't Xiao Xian, but someone else, the outcome would have been different. At the thought of the Linlu tribesmen's actions, Black Bear's anger rose again. You want to use me as a stepping stone? No matter how many people there were in the Linlu tribe, beating up the leader of the Black Bear caravan was equivalent to slapping the caravan's face. If Black Bear was beaten up in front of so many people today, the people of King City would laugh at the Black Bear caravan. Even if the caravan fought back in the future, what happened couldn't be denied. It would be a stain in the caravan's history that couldn't be erased. Plus, there was no fairness. Luckily, these people were blind to pick on Xiao Xian of all people. Thinking of the time when he saw Xiao Xian block the big bronze cauldron with one palm in Amba City, and then looking at the person standing there with a bronze hammer, Black Bear's evaluation of Xiao Xian changed again. This was indeed the style of the Yanjiao tribes. Black Bear glanced at the Linlu tribesman coldly. He took a step forward, his exposed arms and face covered in dark brown totemic tattoos. When the tattoos appeared, the thick beard that covered half of his face became as straight as copper needles. His beardless face also grew dark brown hair. His pupils dilated, flashing with a cold and violent light. His muscles swelled like they were inflated with air, making him look twice his size. Black Bear let out a long roar, like the roar of a giant bear in the forest. Many people covered their ears. The roar spread far and wide like a wave. The city guards patrolling the area heard the roar and quickly ran towards it. When they arrived, they realized that it was a gang fight. They thought that a giant beast was rebelling in the city. Usually, the city guards wouldn't care about conflicts between people or tribes as long as they didn't go overboard. What they meant by "don't go overboard" was that it didn't affect the interests of the 6 noble families. As for the lives of others, that was up to them. If it was some unimportant people, they wouldn't care. Once the fight was over, compensation would be paid. The damage in the royal city would also be repaired. That was why when they saw that it wasn't a giant beast causing trouble but a fight, the city guards stopped in their tracks. "Let's go. It's Black Bear and the Lu family. It's none of our business." The city guard took one look and turned to leave. "Hey, don't go yet. Didn't they say Lubi from the Lu family is very powerful? Look at the situation over there, it's different from what we imagined. The Lu family must be bragging. There are many powerful people in the royal city. Even if they're powerful in the Lu family, they might not be ranked in the royal city. They must have just arrived in the royal city and wanted to test their skills on Black Bear. Too bad Black Bear isn't easy to deal with. There'll be trouble later. Let's not get involved. Let them fight." An older city guard said disapprovingly, "Plus, that's the Gongjia family's territory. They have their own guards so we don't have to do anything. Let's go patrol somewhere else. The crazy mammoth we killed today tasted pretty good. I wonder what the next crazy giant beast will be." The others agreed. The people of the royal city loved to watch a show, but these city guards were used to it. They weren't that curious. If they wanted to watch a show, they would have been here long ago. Then again, if they stayed here, they might get caught up in it. Why bother? Hence, the city guards hurried over and left in a hurry. When the Linlu tribesmen received the news, they gathered their men and rushed over. On the other side, the Black Bears who heard Black Bear's roar immediately ran out the door, rushing towards the source of the sound. The two parties met, their killing intent boiling. It looked like a fight was about to break out. The surrounding crowd retreated further away but did not leave. This was a rare opportunity. They had to watch it live. Hearing it from someone else was definitely not as satisfying as seeing it with their own eyes. The Gongjia family guards looked at each other. Their orders were that as long as the people outside did not fight their way in or damage the Gongjia family's door, they could do whatever they wanted outside. If there were too many people here to test their swords, there would be fights and they would have to compensate them. But now, the situation was getting worse. Although they were still some distance away from the door, it happened here. They had to go in and report it and ask for the master's opinion. Inside the Gongjia family's courtyard, there was an open-air round table made of bronze. A well-dressed young man sat at the table. Although he did not speak, he had an aura of calmness that could not be ignored. When a guard ran over, he slowed down when he saw the young man. He bowed slightly and planned to continue walking. The young man looked up with a frown. Although there was no anger in his eyes, the guard could clearly sense that the young man was angry. His heart tightened. "What is it?" asked the young man. The guard thought for a moment. "It's something outside. The Black Bears who came to test their swords are fighting with the Lu family. There are more and more people here now. I'm afraid something might happen." The young man's frown deepened. He was clearly unhappy about this. He had heard the commotion outside too, but his mind was on the forging room 10 steps away. He had completely ignored the commotion outside. Where are the city guards? The city guards came and left. The guard hung his head in silence. The young man was even more displeased, but this was how the city guards worked these days. He said, "Let them fight outside the city. There are too many of them." The guard hung his head even lower. His first purpose here was to report what was happening outside. His second purpose was to ask for help from the other guards in the Gongjia family. Then, the young man was about to say something when he heard the commotion from the forging room. He stopped talking and hurried over. Master Heng, how was it? Heng walked out of the forging room, looking exhausted. He wiped the sweat off his face and shook his head helplessly. The young man's expectant gaze dimmed, returning to calmness. His gaze was determined. If that's the case, I'll continue to search until I succeed. If I still can't find it, then I'll have to. Heng sighed. Why do you have to do this? You're willing to sacrifice yourself for a sword. He walked to the round table, picked up the pot of warm water and poured it into his mouth. After drinking half the pot, he turned to the guard. What happened now? The guard was here because of the commotion outside. These days, Heng had received several reports of fighting outside. However, he had spent most of his time in the forging room. The isolation was too good, so he did not know what was going on outside. The guard repeated what he had just said. Tell them to get lost, said Heng mercilessly. Chapter 443. Yes, sir. The guard took 2 steps, then remembered something. He turned back and said to Heng, one more thing, there's a young man outside with a sword. There are cloud patterns on the sword, that cloud pattern. The guard glanced at Heng. It looks like you left it there. When the guard saw the young man fighting Lubi take out the golden sword, he paid extra attention to it. He had worked as a guard for the Gongjia family for a long time, so he knew more about weapons than others. He could recognize cloud patterns too. That was why when Xiao Xian took the sword out of its sheath, they had their eyes on it. Even though they were far away, they could see what the cloud pattern looked like. Nonsense. When did I forge a sword with cloud patterns? After returning to the royal city, other than the first few days of interaction with the Gongjia family elders, Heng spent most of his time in isolation. He was locked up in the forging room, researching. When did he forge a sword for anyone? Even if he did not give it away. He kept it in the forging room. How could it be in the hands of an outsider? It was. Wait. Heng's heart skipped a beat. He almost spat out the water in his stomach. Wait, the kid you're talking about, what does he look like? What did he look like? The guard tried to recall but realized he did not have much of an impression. He was too focused on the sword. Under Heng's gaze, the guard braced himself and said, that kid is pretty strong. He stole Lubi's hammer and chased after him. He looks like a tribesman and the totemic patterns on his body look like flames. Heng said, ask him if he's Yanjiao Xiao Xian. If he is, bring him in. The young man standing at the side was already shocked when he heard the guard say someone stole Lubi's hammer and chased after him. When he heard Heng's reply, he was even more shocked. Yanjiao Xiao Xian. I've never heard of that name. Master Heng, do you know him? Did you really forge a sword for him? Asked the young man. Heng nodded. If it's really him, I gave him the sword. But when the sword was mentioned, he remembered the embarrassing incident when he chopped rocks to test his sword in the Yanjiao tribe. He had been inspired by that incident when he proposed to test his sword by chopping rocks to test his sword. However, there was no need to say those things out loud. Yanjiao, that name sounds familiar, the young man said in a low voice. That's not a person's name. It's the name of a tribe. The Yanjiao tribe, said Heng. Ah. It's them. The young man remembered. I once heard the elders of the clan mention the Yanjiao tribe. They said that every time the Yanjiao people came to the royal city, something would always happen. However, it has been many years since the last time someone from Yanjiao came to the royal city. At that time, even you, Master Heng, weren't even born yet. I can't believe they're here again. Thinking about what the elders said about the Yanjiao people, the young man said, that's true. They caused quite a commotion this time too. They stole Luby's hammer in front of so many people and even chased after him. This is enough for the royal city to talk about for a long time. Heng had something he didn't say. He suspected that if he didn't let Xiao Xian in soon, would he stomp on the door? Or had he already stomped on it? Ji Fang, you've been sitting here the whole time. You heard the commotion outside, right? Was it very loud? Heng was worried. The young man, Ji Fang, thought for a moment. I think so. There was a rumbling noise. Heng was even more worried now. The guard who came to report had left, so he couldn't ask for details. But why was Xiao Xian in the royal city now? Could it be that their tribe's 1,000-grain gold was ripe? He was looking forward to that. Seeing that Heng was deep in thought, Ji Fang didn't ask further. However, he remembered the name Yanjiao Xiao Xian. He would get someone to investigate and ask about the Yanjiao tribe. How did Master Heng know this person? From his tone, they seemed to be close too. On the other side, the guard who received Heng's orders returned to the door, confused and shocked. The 300 people from the Black Bear tribe were in a standoff with a group from the Linlu tribe. The leaders of both sides were arguing, their eyes spitting fire as they drew their swords. The guard couldn't care less. After exiting the door, he jogged towards the Black Bears. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi were standing there. The two sides that were about to start fighting stopped temporarily because of the guard's arrival. The Black Bear and Linlu tribesmen stared at the person jogging over. Both sides' hearts were pounding. Now that they had calmed down, they regretted their actions. Was the Gongjia family angry? Did they come out to threaten them? They had miscalculated, they had been too impulsive. They shouldn't have started a fight at the Gongjia family's doorstep. The surroundings fell silent. The onlookers kept their mouths shut, quieting down so they could hear what was going on. With a few hundred pairs of eyes and 3 layers of onlookers watching, the average-sized guard ran towards the Black Bears. The people around Black Bear quickly made way for the guard to speak to their boss. However, the guard didn't look at Black Bear. Instead, he walked towards Xiao Xian. Young man, are you Xiao Xian from Yanjiao? Asked the guard. His tone was polite, not as cold and distant as usual. I am, said Xiao Xian. Master Heng invites you. Swoosh. The people of the Black Bears all turned to look at Xiao Xian, their eyes glowing with envy. Black Bear whispered something into Mao Da's ear. Mao Da nodded quickly and Black Bear sheathed his sword. He rubbed his hands and ignored the Linlu tribesman as he followed Xiao Xian. The guard didn't say he wanted to invite him, but he didn't say he wouldn't either. They had to be thick-skinned at times like this. Once Black Bear left, Mao Da hurried his people back. His boss wanted them to prepare some gifts. After all, they had caused such a ruckus at the Gongjia family's doorstep. They had to do something to appease the master so they could ask for a sword in the future. As for the Linlu tribesmen, who cared about them at a time like this? They could go play on their own. Let's deal with Gongjia Heng first. The Black Bears ignored the Linlu tribesmen and left. Whoa, the surrounding crowd burst into an uproar. They had all heard the guard's words just now and were discussing among themselves. Xiao Xian didn't listen to their discussion. After entering the Gongjia residence, the noise outside was much quieter. As for the hammer, he gave it to the Gongjia guards. It was inconvenient to carry such a huge hammer around. After so many days, Xiao Xian realized that Gongjia Heng had changed. He now had the aura of a master. Hey, it's you. Heng got up to greet him. Master Heng, I'm sorry to disturb you. Xiao Xian smiled. Ha, you're too kind. Heng was very happy to see Xiao Xian again. I heard you beat up Luby from the Lu family. Even if they came knocking on my door, I can't let them beat me up. Xiao Xian shrugged. Do you have a place to stay in the royal city? If you don't, you can stay at my place. I have plenty of space, said Heng. Heng was worried that Xiao Xian would cause trouble and the other powers in the royal city would seek revenge. Staying at the Gongjia residence would definitely be safer. Xiao Xian understood, but he still declined. Black Bear saw that Heng and Xiao Xian were chatting happily, so he didn't interrupt. He only spoke when Xiao Xian mentioned him. Black Bear Baimi greets Master Heng. After all, they were here with Xiao Xian, so Heng didn't show any displeasure. Plus, it wasn't their fault. Heng then introduced Ji Fang to Xiao Xian. The second son of the king, Ji Fang. To tribesmen, the king's son was the same as the chief's son next door. That was why Xiao Xian followed the other tribesmen's train of thought without any fear. Xiao Xian was here to visit Heng and give him the 1,000-grain gold. He was here to ask for a knife. Come, let's talk inside. Heng brought them to a room not far from the forging room. That was where they received guests. The forging room was a private place, no outsiders were allowed to enter. To the Gongjia family, they could live without a bedroom, but they could not live without a forging room. The forging room held too many secrets and was too important. Of course, they could not just bring anyone in. Even Wang Er's son, Ji Fang, could only wait outside when he came to ask for a sword. Xiao Xian drew a picture of Guang Yi's knife on a white cloth. Heng knew that Xiao Xian would be staying in Royal City for a while, so there was no rush. He would make the knife for Guang Yi when he had time. All right, I understand. Don't worry, you'll be satisfied with the result. If you're not satisfied, I'll make more changes. Right, how's your sword? Do you need it fixed? Asked Heng. I do. Xiao Xian took out his sword. The blade was bent at an angle after he blocked two of Lubi's hammers. Leave it here too. I'll fix it for you. Heng wanted to invite Xiao Xian over for a drink tomorrow. After he became a blacksmith, he received many gifts of alcohol. I can't tomorrow. I promised someone I'll be there, said Xiao Xian. Who did you promise? Someone more important than me? Heng said jokingly. He was not serious, but there was pride in his tone. He had the right to be. I'll be visiting Ji-ju tomorrow. Heng said. Go ahead. In terms of seniority, he could not compare to Ji-ju. Although the Gongjia family had always been proud, they still acknowledged Ji-ju's reputation. After eating golden grains for 20 years, Heng was familiar with Ji-ju. Even Ji Fang, who was about to leave, sat back down and continued to listen. Xiao Xian did not say much. After a brief conversation, he left a small animal skin bag for Heng and left. After Xiao Xian left, Ji Fang looked at the animal skin bag in Heng's hand and raised his hand to snatch it. He had a feeling this had something to do with what Ji-ju had been hiding. Unfortunately, Heng hid his hand behind his back. You want to see? No way. Xiao Xian gave him a look before he left. It was best not to tell anyone. Chapter 444. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi's swords were with Heng. Heng would fix Xiao Xian's sword. However, Heng looked at the sword with disdain. Perhaps it was due to his experience and understanding of advanced techniques that he no longer liked the original sword. He would probably make bigger changes. As for Guang Yi's sword, it was a useless sword. Heng did not even look at it. When they came out, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi had brought two temporary swords from Heng. They were not very good but much better than Guang Yi's previous swords. Black Bear wanted to leave his sword there for Heng to fix, but today was not the right day. He would wait, there was no rush. Since he was able to come in and Xiao Xian had mentioned the sword test, Heng knew that the next time he came would be a good time. It would be best if he could get an axe. When they came out, the hole at the entrance was being filled up. There were Black Bears and Linlu tribesmen. They split into two groups to fill up the hole, not interfering with each other. As the saying goes, the first spurt of energy, the second spurt of energy, the second spurt of energy, and the third spurt of exhaustion. They didn't fight when they were most impulsive, but now that they had calmed down, they each had their own thoughts and no longer had any thoughts of standing up. Of course, that was only because they didn't fight here and now. Perhaps not long after, they would fight to the death in other places. Both sides had sent gifts to the Gongjia family. The Linlu tribe wanted to send gifts tomorrow, but when they saw Mao Da rushing back with so many gifts, they did not want to be left behind. After all, they might need the Gongjia family's help in the future in the royal city. This was especially true for Master Heng, who had just emerged this year. Even if they were not on good terms with him, they could not afford to offend him. However, Black Bear was not so worried. When he saw how familiar Heng was with Xiao Xian, he was relieved. At the same time, he was glad. They had helped the Yanjiao people because of Amba City. They did not expect to encounter something like this in the royal city. Who would have thought that the Yanjiao tribe, which had not set foot in the royal city for decades, would actually know Ji Ju and Heng Hengda? Even if the other people in the royal city forgot about the Yanjiao tribe, after today, there would be more people who would remember the tribe that had caused several sensations in the royal city. The ability of the people of the royal city to gossip should not be underestimated. After visiting Gongjia Heng, Xiao Xian prepared a change of clothes. He also sold 2 bags of the grains he got from Ji Ju to the Black Bears. He still had some gold leaves with him. The next morning, Xiao Xian, Guang Yi, and Black Bear went to golden grain fields again. Last time, it was mentioned that Xiao Xian should stay at the fields for a while so he would not attract attention if he ran around every day. This time, Xiao Xian brought his equipment and prepared to stay at the fields for 3 to 5 days. He wanted to see how Ji Ju's fields worked, learn more about the crops and the customs here. Black Bear was here to make himself known. At the same time, he wanted to borrow Xiao Xian's reputation to get some newly harvested grains from the steward. He could not stay at the fields for too long. Ji Ju did not invite him and he knew that. That was why after he followed Xiao Xian to the fields and made a deal with the steward, Black Bear left happily. Ji Ju did not usually manage the trade. If he had to do everything himself, why would he need so many stewards? That was why he was only in charge of the farming and left the trading to the stewards. Outsiders wanted to get their hands on golden grain. Sure, go find the steward, flatter him and bribe him. That was why the steward of the golden grain fields had such a high status. In the field, the harvest in autumn was the most abundant. Although there were crops harvested in other seasons, they were relatively less. At this time, the field had already harvested a batch of millets. The immature ones had matured one after another. During this time, the slaves in the field were very busy. They had to harvest, plant, and prepare the crops in the field for winter. Every tribulation of the 1,000 grain gold is very important. Once it passes the first tribulation, it will reach the peak of growth. Don't look at how small they are now. After the second tribulation, they will grow faster. By the third tribulation, they will have ears. Too bad you won't be able to see it, Ji Ju said regretfully. He wanted to show off but Xiao Xian and the rest had to go back before winter. That was the tribe's custom. When the 1,000 grain gold ripened, the Yanjiao tribe would have just finished their ceremony. Xiao Xian would not be able to make it. As Ji Ju spoke, he stared at the slaves who were in charge of the 1,000 grain gold. The raw materials for the fertilizer were divided into several large vats. They were all prepared by Ji Ju before being mixed and diluted a second time. Then, they were poured into the ground. Just like some medicines produced by factories, the original solution would be mixed before use, labeled as Solution A, Solution B, etc. When it was time to use, they would mix Solution A and Solution B according to the ratio in the manual. This was the same principle. Ji Ju would not reveal the secret to anyone. Even if the slaves and stewards in charge of the 1,000 grain gold knew the ratio and method of the second mixing, they did not know what the initial fertilizer was. How would they mix it? As for the ones in your tribe, Ji-ju thought for a moment, then suggested, if you plant them next year, you can try letting the meat rot. You can also add some animal bones, especially those that like to eat grass, shoots and moss. If animal bones are not enough, you can try adding bone marrow. You can do that? Xiao Xian was shocked. Ji-ju mumbled but did not explain further. Knowing that it might involve some secrets, Xiao Xian did not ask further. He noted down all of Ji-ju's suggestions and would try again next year. Ji-ju gave a few more suggestions and Xiao Xian noted them down one by one. Ji-ju felt that Xiao Xian had already told him how to plant the 1,000-grain gold. It was not nice of him to hide everything from him. That was why even though Ji-ju did not reveal the secret of the 1,000-grain gold, other than giving some suggestions, he also told Xiao Xian many other ways to plant other grains. What kind of crops were suited to what kind of environment, what kind of crops needed to be grown, and the key points to pay attention to were all explained. The Ji family claimed to have 100 types of grains, but no one knew if that was true, but Xiao Xian had seen at least 20 to 30 types in the few days he had spent with Ji-ju. Ji-ju had also given some excellent seeds according to Xiao Xian's description of the Yanjiao tribe's geographical and weather conditions. The seeds produced by Ji-ju's fields were things that the tribes far away could not buy even if they had large amounts of gold leaves. Xiao Xian thanked him and put them away carefully. Even though the Yanjiao tribe mainly hunted for a living now, no one could say for sure if they would change their way of life in the future. If there was a chance to go back to the other side of the sea, he could also bring back the seeds here. Many fields had been reclaimed at the old haunt. When Ji-ju introduced the grains to Xiao Xian, the steward would often pick out the best of the newly harvested grains and put them in a few pots for Ji-ju to see. When Ji-ju picked one, someone would take the pot with the new grain. What are the grains for? Xiao Xian asked. They will be made into grave goods, Ji-ju answered. Grave goods? For whom? For me, of course. Ji-ju did not think there was anything wrong with saying this. Our Ji family is buried with grains. When the Ji family was in its most difficult times, with countless natural disasters and no harvest, we went to our ancestors' tombs to retrieve the grains that had been sealed away for emergency use. Ever since I obtained my own fief, every year when I harvest new grains, I will choose the best ones and store them away. On the day I leave, I will bring the jars with the grains sealed in them into the tomb. That way, I will be able to answer to my ancestors. In the future, if the descendants of the Ji family meet with any natural disasters, I would be able to help them. Xiao Xian. You're still alive and well, but you're already thinking about your death. However, what Ji-ju said was something that many Ji family members would do. The Ji family had stopped cremation a long time ago. Even some of the younger generation would carefully store the grains after getting them. This was a tradition passed down from generation to generation. As for why they used earthen jars instead of bronze, it was because many bronze wares would rust over time unless they were specially treated. However, not everyone had the skills and confidence to do so. Thus, the Ji family had a habit of using earthen jars to store grain. The bronze wares were just one of the funerary objects. Perhaps to others, the exquisite bronze wares were the most important funerary objects. However, in reality, the Ji family's tombs were filled with various jars and urns filled with grains. That was the most important thing. Some would be sealed with the Ji family's secret technique to preserve them for a long time. Some would remain intact even after thousands of years. Some would be left unsealed in alms bowls for their dead selves. The symbolism was that after death, they would still have grains to eat and would not starve. If the later generations entered the tombs of their ancestors and saw that the unsealed urns or jars were filled with decayed grain husks or even decayed grayish-white grain powder, they would put some new grains in them as a sign of respect. Some dared to think about the Ji family's tombs, but unfortunately, no one knew where it was. The people who went to look for him, searched and searched, but they never saw him again. Ji brought Xiao Xian to see the different types of grains in the golden grain fields. When he saw that the 1,000-grain gold had successfully passed the second calamity, he felt a huge weight lifted off his chest and was in the mood to bring Xiao Xian out for a walk. Recently, it was the peak harvest season for the slave owners' fields. To avoid trouble, they sealed off the roads so Xiao Xian did not see anyone loitering outside the fields. Walking out of the fields, Xiao Xian saw some new crops in other fields. One of them looked like an upside-down corn cob. It was as tall as a person and there was only one stalk. It was similar to some of the plants he had seen in the wild, but the ones in the fields were domesticated and could be eaten. "Whose land is that?" asked Xiao Xian as he walked on the dirt path, pointing at a busy farm not far away. They were on high ground so they could see part of the fields. "That's the Yi family's land. I don't remember who owns it." Ji didn't mind. It was just a small farm and the things he grew were all very ordinary. Chapter 445. The farmstead in front was not far from Jiju's golden grain farmstead. The fences around the farmstead were not tall, only about the height of a person. It was close to the average height of a person in the royal city. If one did not want to look, they could not see it. If they wanted to, they just had to stand on their tiptoes or step on a small rock. Even if they did not stand on their tiptoes, they could still see through the gaps between the fences because the gaps between the fences were not small. All in all, the fences around the farmstead were perfunctory, but they served their purpose. Even though this farmstead was adjacent to the golden grain farmstead, no one usually paid attention to it. One reason was that the farmstead was too small. The people here were rich in land and the land was vast. With such a small plot of land, it was obvious that the owner was not a big shot. People who passed by did not want to waste their energy on it. Secondly, and most importantly, the crops in this farmstead were of poor quality. Almost everyone who looked inside would shake their heads and not pay attention to it anymore. Over time, no one remembered who owned this farmstead. They would not even give it a second glance as they passed by. With such a small plot of land, one could see the end of it at a glance. The crops in the field were all stunted and could not be sold for a high price. It was fine to leave it for the owner to eat. At least he would not starve to death, but it would be difficult to sell it. Ji also did not remember who owned this land. He only knew that it belonged to the Yi family. However, this farmstead was too small. In his memory, it seemed to have changed owners several times. He remembered that there were 2 wells in this farm. One had dried up, and the other was barely maintaining the farm. The weather in the past few years had been rather dry, and the crops in the farm had not been growing well. The frequent changes in owners were also due to the wells. He just did not know which unlucky person from the Yi family had taken over. The Yi family. Tsk, Ji shook his head. Xiao Xian could feel the unspoken words from what Ji had said in the past. In Jiju's opinion, the Yi family was not suited for this. They could do divination on the street but not in the fields. They did not have the talent. Moreover, the Yi family was full of lunatics. Some of them were not strong. On cold days, they could stare at the dark sky for an entire night. Then, they would be half dead and bedridden for a few days. How could their bodies withstand the cold wind? He was courting death. The Yi family was the most suicidal of the 6 aristocrats. There were also some who sat with blank eyes. Then, as if they had thought of something, they would suddenly laugh out loud or suddenly grieve. It was frightening. Ji recalled the usual behavior of the Yi family members he knew and could only shake his head helplessly. He could not understand. However, the fact that the Yi family was able to become one of the aristocrats of the 6 tribes meant that they had their own capabilities. The Yi family didn't develop their muscles or bones, but their brains. Some people could observe the heavens and earth, some could predict good or bad luck, and some had other talents. If the Yi family really wanted to scheme, they could dig a hole without a shovel and kill without a knife. This was also why many people were in awe of the Yi family. However, Ji-ju was not afraid of the Yi family. Other than the few people in the Yi family who were truly capable, the rest of them could scare off those who did not know the truth. But if they were to put on airs in front of him, he directly ordered people to take care of him with sticks. "Why, are you curious about the Yi family?" asked Ji-ju. Many remote tribes came to the royal city and were always curious about the Yi family. "A little. I think they're quite mysterious," said Xiao Xian. "What's there to be mysterious about? They're just putting on an act." Ji-ju did not think much of it. However, Xiao Xian was not curious because he heard that the field belonged to the Yi family. He was just curious because he saw the scene in the field. It was the peak harvest season for most of the fields. The field not far away was the same. Although it was pathetically small compared to the surrounding fields, the overall harvest was still okay. The slaves in the field carried their bags to an open space in the field. There was a short wooden table there, and a man in dark clothes was sitting in front of the table. Although he was not dressed conspicuously, there was a sense of elegance about him. He was different from the busy slaves. The other party was young and did not look like a steward. At this time, he was sitting at the table, holding a pen and writing something on a cloth. The slaves carried their bags and reported to him, then left for the warehouse. He was probably counting. This was nothing. Xiao Xian was curious about the movements of his other hand. He saw that on his other hand, 4 fingers were slightly bent and the tip of his thumb was moving back and forth between the knuckles of the other 4 fingers. "Come, let's go take a look. You can't even farm like this." Ji-ju walked over. He had also seen the crops planted in the field. By his standards, it was simply too horrible to look at. He had only gone over to say a few words, but he felt uneasy. The person sitting in his field was counting the harvest and sighing. When he heard the report, he quickly put down his pen and walked over to greet him. "I am from the Yi family, E.C. Why are you here?" E.C. bowed respectfully and looked at Ji-ju in surprise. "Why, can't I come?" No, you're welcome." E.C. asked someone to bring a chair over for Ji-ju. "No need, I'll leave after a while." Ji-ju waved his hand. When he saw the crops in the field, his anger flared again. "What kind of land is this? I can't stand it." E.C. thought, "What kind of land is this if you can stand it?" But he still listened humbly. The moment Ji-ju opened his mouth, he went on and on about which plots of land were too densely planted, which plots of land were too sparsely planted, which plots of land were severely lacking in water, and that soil, was that even soil? It was as hard as a rock. E.C. listened silently with his head lowered. When Ji-ju finished, E.C. smiled helplessly. There are indeed many shortcomings. But he didn't plant this land. His father was the one looking after it. He was only here to help count. This piece of land was not good, not only because of the well, but also because of the soil quality. They didn't know what had been planted in the past, but it had changed the soil quality. They couldn't restore it and the crops they planted were poor for 2 years. Even with the Ji family's guidance, they were not cut out for this. The harvest could barely sustain them. Poor. Ji-ju was angry at this person's lack of improvement. But since he wasn't from the Ji family, he didn't want to say more. Fortunately, he wasn't from the Ji family. If he was, he would probably die from anger. Ji-ju snorted and stopped talking. He motioned for E.C. to continue with his work while he walked towards the well nearby to check on the situation. Xiao Xian followed him to take a look. The situation was not good. The water level has dropped again. Ji-ju was troubled. From the looks of it, it would get drier year after year. Even drought-resistant crops needed water. It'll get better, Xiao Xian comforted. No, you don't understand. Ji Ju looked worried. I have a feeling that something big is going to happen. There are always signs of changes in the world. Also. Ji Ju didn't finish his sentence. He knew someone from the Yi family. That person was also the crazy person who stayed outside in the cold to stare at the night sky. He remembered that old friend once said in his sickbed, the world that is united for a long time must be divided, and divided for a long time must be united. Unfortunately, when he asked that person after the incident, that person didn't say anything. He only smiled meaningfully. His smile was very annoying. Because of this, the Ji family was on high alert. If there were any signs of rebellion, they would forcefully suppress it. They had worked so hard to build up the current situation. How could they allow others to destroy it? They were especially wary of the other 5 aristocratic families and the newly rising tribes. They were also the main targets of observation. At this moment, a flirtatious voice came from the entrance of the field. Little Xiao Xian looked over to see a young woman in a delicately sewn silk gown. Her body was voluptuous but not bloated. She twisted her waist and combed her hair into a casual but flirtatious bun. She looked up with a smile and walked in quickly. Her steps were not big but her steps were quick. Her skirt fluttered like a blooming flower. She raised a delicate hand to cover her mouth and walked towards EC. Her eyes were like water and she smiled. She was about to say something when she saw Ji Ju not far away. Her expression froze. She didn't expect to see Ji Ju here. She quickly stopped smiling and stood up straight. She bowed slightly to Ji Ju and threw a roll of cloth to EC. Then she asked a slave to bring a chair with a back. The slaves in the field were no strangers to this person, so they weren't surprised by her words and actions. Xiao Xian saw the patterns on her clothes and remembered what Black Bear told him about the aristocratic families of the 6 tribes. He guessed that this woman was from the Mu family of the 6 tribes. Ji Ju was unhappy with the Mu family woman's actions but didn't say anything. To him, as long as it wasn't someone from the Ji family, he didn't care. If he had the time, he might as well look at the 1,000-grain gold. The roll of cloth the Mu family woman threw to EC was actually a record of her harvest from the field this time. She had come to ask EC to help her verify it again. She didn't have the patience to verify it herself. If she really wanted to verify it, she might not be able to do it in a day or 2. She didn't even know if her calculations were correct, so she came to find EC. EC didn't say much. He put down his work and opened the roll of cloth the woman threw to him. There were more than 20 pieces of cloth, each about half a meter long and 2 palms wide. They were all filled with small, densely packed words. EC flipped the cloth with one hand while 4 fingers on his other hand moved quickly. His thumb was like a shadow as it moved between the other 4 fingers. Xiao Xian noticed that when EC looked at the roll of cloth, he only glanced at the words on each piece before moving on. It took him less than half a minute to finish 1 piece of cloth. After looking through all 20 pieces of cloth filled with words, he wrote down the final result on an unwritten piece of cloth. In total, it took him only 15 minutes. When he was done, EC's eyes were filled with envy. He handed the results and the roll of cloth to the woman. Congratulations, it's another big harvest. The woman giggled until fine lines appeared at the corners of her eyes. She was in a good mood because of this harvest. However, when she saw the final result, her expression changed instantly. Like a ribbon suddenly turning into a steel knife, her eyes were filled with a cold, murderous intent. Those lowly slaves, they actually underreported by so much. Each page didn't underreport by much. If one's arithmetic wasn't good enough, they might have made a mistake. However, when the pages were combined and the final result looked at, there was a lot more. The woman didn't tell EC the results reported by the servants. However, since EC calculated the results, it must be true. That was why the woman was angry. In the past, she couldn't be bothered to make a fuss about it and turned a blind eye to it. But now, the servants were simply too greedy. If she didn't give them a beating, they would be even bolder next time. I'll send someone to deliver the reward tomorrow. After saying that, the woman took EC's results and left quickly. She was filled with a murderous aura. She reckoned that blood would be spilled at the farmstead later. Xiao Xian finally realized that this woman from the Yi family was helping others calculate the accounts. However, how did this person's brain work? It was like a humanoid computer. Seeing that Ji Zhu was not willing to talk, Xiao Xian did not continue asking. He and Guang Yi had already stayed here for many days. They had seen the 1,000-grain gold grow again after passing the second tribulation. They had also identified many useful crops and obtained precious seeds. Xiao Xian planned to leave. There was nothing to do even if he continued to disturb them. However, before he left, there was something he needed to settle. The next day, Ji Zhu locked himself in his room in Qingmeng Palace and did not come out. Xiao Xian went out on his own. The guards at the gates already knew Xiao Xian and did not stop him when Xiao Xian said he was just going out for a walk. Xiao Xian went straight to EC's farm. EC had just finished checking a thick roll of cloth for someone. Beside it were 5 burlap bags filled with grains. This was his reward. A large man with an oily face took the roll of cloth and left with a dark expression. He must have found out that his subordinates were greedy. His footsteps were filled with the smell of blood. When he saw Xiao Xian enter, EC only glanced up without much enthusiasm. What's wrong? Is the owner of the Golden Grain Farm not here today? No, I have something to ask you, said Xiao Xian. Oh. I don't do things without a reward. EC raised an eyebrow. If you can solve it, of course there will be a reward. Hearing that, EC finally looked at Xiao Xian. Tell me, what is it? How much do you need me to calculate? Or do you want to change the accounts? None of those. As he spoke, Xiao Xian took out a small piece of light-colored linen cloth. There were 2 concentric circles drawn with paint on the cloth. There were also some symbols and lines on the drawing. This was the diagram of the circles left behind by the Yi family that Xiao Xian had copied from the walls of Gongjie Valley. However, he had broken down the complicated diagram and simplified it before drawing it on the cloth. Now, he was showing it to EC. He could not understand these diagrams left behind by the Yi family, so he could not deduce what he wanted from the diagram. However, he saw that EC was very talented in calculations yesterday. He also did not seem to have much ambition. According to what he heard from the steward of the golden grain fields yesterday, EC's family was only a marginal part of the Yi family. Otherwise, they would not have been able to survive in such a small field with poor soil quality and only one working well. Also, EC could not perform divination, so he could not survive in the royal city's divination street. He could only use his talent to earn money. EC saw that Xiao Xian had only taken out 1 piece of cloth. He was surprised. Just 1 piece. That was easy. However, when EC unfolded the cloth and saw the diagram on it, his pupils constricted. He shot up and stared at Xiao Xian. How did you get the diagram of the Yi family? Diagram of the ring. So the circular diagrams were called diagrams. You don't need to know how I got it. You just need to tell me how to solve this diagram, said Xiao Xian. EC stared at Xiao Xian for a few seconds, then sat down again. He tapped his fingers on the table. What do you want to know? Solution. You can't possibly know. Xiao Xian did not refute. He pointed at the lines and symbols on the diagram and asked EC to explain. EC did not refuse. He briefly explained the meaning of those symbols and the broken line. He did not mention the core secrets, nor did he mention the key to how they used the ring analysis diagram to calculate quickly. To them, it did not matter if outsiders knew about this. The Yi family had many secrets, but very few people could understand them. The Yi family and the Gongjia family were just as confident and arrogant. However, Xiao Xian only needed to know what the lines and lines represented, and how large the numbers were. That was enough. To verify, he added some numbers into the diagram and asked EC to tell him the final result. Then, he took out a thin charcoal stick and a piece of cloth. Since there was no place to put them, he placed the cloth on the other side of EC's table. EC stared at the diagram as he calculated. Xiao Xian did the same. He did not have a crazy brain like EC, so he could only do rough calculations. When Xiao Xian was done, EC was already waiting. When Xiao Xian stopped writing, EC looked away from the piece of cloth Xiao Xian was writing on. He looked at Xiao Xian in surprise. "You're done too?" Usually, if it was someone else, it would take at least half a day. How could he be so fast? Xiao Xian could not help but admire EC's calculation speed. He could not even do it with his fingers. "What's the result?" Xiao Xian asked. EC was still doubtful as he handed the cloth over. Xiao Xian looked at EC's result. It was the same as his own. He was satisfied. Although he was slower than EC, he just needed to understand how the ring analysis worked. He could also copy the complicated diagram from the mountain wall. "You really calculated it?" EC was shocked. Why was there someone like this around? Was he trying to steal his business? How much will I be paid?" Xiao Xian asked. EC thought for a moment, then extended 5 fingers. 50 golden leaves. 50 golden leaves were equivalent to 5 bags of grains on the ground. "However, if you can tell me how you calculated it, I won't take the reward." EC said, "You just need to tell me the rough method you used. You don't need to tell me the details." Xiao Xian counted 50 golden leaves and put them on the table. He then collected several pieces of cloth and turned to leave. "Wait!" EC called out. Xiao Xian thought EC was going to ask about the calculation. Unexpectedly, EC said, "Recently, there have been fewer birds in the sky." Xiao Xian looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean? Are you going to leave the field soon? If so, be careful." EC did not overdo it. He could not do divination, but he could come to such a conclusion based on the changes in the birds in the sky. "Thank you." Xiao Xian thanked him and left EC's field. After Xiao Xian left, EC took out a piece of cloth and used a brush dipped in sticky paint to write on it. If Xiao Xian was here, he would definitely find that what EC wrote were several vertical multiplication and division formulas that he had listed out during his calculations. Although what Xiao Xian wrote at that time seemed to be written upside down in EC's opinion, the numbers and the vertical lines were all unfamiliar to him. What EC wrote at this moment was exactly the same as the vertical formulas, numbers, and lines listed on the cloth that Xiao Xian had drafted. After he finished writing, EC looked at the unfamiliar symbols and lines on the cloth and thought. From time to time, he would use the brush to draw on a number and mark it with a symbol that he was used to. "Young master, someone from the An family fields is here to ask for your help." A field steward came over and told EC. EC kept the cloth and signaled for the steward to bring the person in. After this, close the gates. That's all for today. Huh? The steward was still calculating the profits from the past few days. How much profit could he get? Why was the young master not taking any more jobs? Then, what about tomorrow? Asked the steward. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Yes. Although it was a pity, the steward still followed EC's instructions. He hung a sign at the entrance of the field, indicating that the people who came later could go back. The young master was resting today and did not say when he would start taking jobs again. Regardless of what happened at the field, Xiao Xian went back and called Guang Yi, who was looking after the stewards, over to discuss and leave. Chapter 447. After packing up, Xiao Xian bid farewell to Ji Ju and left with Guang Yi with the seeds Ji Ju gave them. Ji Ju was busy with something in the house. He only showed his face for a short while before going into seclusion again. The butler prepared a bullock cart for Xiao Xian. There were few horses in the fields but some cows. They were the ones who transported the grains to the royal city. The cow the butler brought out was the one used to transport the grains. There's no driver. Xiao Xian was surprised. The butler only brought a wooden cart with a yellow cow pulling it. There were 4 carriages with tents at the back. There was no driver on the cart. There's no need for a driver. The butler smiled. After sending you here, it will come back. Aren't you afraid someone will take it away? Xiao Xian asked. Who would dare? The butler was confident. It has the mark of the golden grain fields on it. Even if it gets lost, there will be many people fighting to send it back. No one will dare to touch this cart, let alone take it away. As if it was responding to the chief steward's words, the yellow cow even mooed. All right, thank you, chief steward. After saying goodbye, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi got on the cart. After settling down, the yellow cow drove off on its own. On the dirt road, there was no one in front, so it sped up. Even if there were people, they would move aside when they saw the obvious mark on the cow. Guang Yi looked enviously at the cow pulling the cart. If only our tribe had something like that. There will be. Xiao Xian remembered the cows used to pull carts in the tribe on the other side of the sea. However, this was not the time to reminisce. Xiao Xian said to Guang Yi, be careful, it might not go smoothly. Guang Yi's heart tightened. Didn't you say no one would dare to touch the cart? That's under normal circumstances. You can't say for sure, there are always special circumstances. Since Xiao Xian said so, Guang Yi unsheathed his sword and peeked through the gaps in the curtains. Yellow Ox was running happily. Suddenly, it slowed down and lost the rhythm of its hooves. It seemed to be a little anxious. After hunting in the forest and experiencing countless life and death situations, Guang Yi's instincts were very sharp. The moment he sensed any movement outside, he adjusted his body to the best combat state and observed his surroundings cautiously. There was an ox cart in front of them. The oxen were the ones commonly used in the surrounding farmsteads. There was nothing special about it. Most farmsteads would leave marks on the oxen, but this one did not. Moreover, it didn't avoid the ox cart like the other carts. Not only did it not avoid it, it even sped up and rushed over. Was that bull crazy? Seeing that the ox cart was about to crash into them, the ox cart on Xiao Xian's side let out an angry cry. It lowered its head, pointed its 2 sharp horns forward, and stomped its hooves on the ground as it charged forward. Bang! Perhaps it was because the cattle in the golden grain fields were fed with high-quality feed, but this one was much bigger and stronger than the others. Its horns collided with the others' horns, and both the cattle and the cart were knocked out of the dirt road. However, this wasn't the end. Before the ox cart was knocked over, the driver cracked his whip. Go! The sacks of grain on the cart were ripped open. The people wrapped so tightly that only their eyes could be seen. Their eyes were like tigers and wolves, and they held unmarked knives and swords in their hands as they charged towards Xiao Xian. Seeing this, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi understood that the other party was coming aggressively. They wanted to rob and kill. Sharp weapons with a cold glint cut through the air, mercilessly slashing at the carriage. The sound of the cloth on the carriage being ripped apart, the sound of the carriage being split open, and a series of different sounds combined into one. It was like a sudden storm, fierce and violent, not giving them any time to breathe. Clang! Crack! The carriage couldn't withstand the sudden attack of so many people. It exploded into pieces and fell to the ground. Only the metal wheels of the carriage rolled on the dirt road until they reached the ditch on the side. Yellow Ox was startled by the sudden turn of events. It let out another long cry after knocking away the other party's cart. Moo! If this was any other place, the ox would have been killed long ago. However, here, none of the robbers touched the ox. Their goal was clear. They were going for the people on the carriage. When Xiao Xian and Guang Yi were ambushed, they rushed out from two different directions. The wooden planks of the carriage under their feet were smashed into pieces. The sword drew a bright light in the air, screaming like a wild beast as it collided with one of the robbers' knives. Clang! The knife in the robber's hand broke, the broken half flying into the air. Although Xiao Xian's sword was not as good as the previous one, it was still a gift from Heng. Even if it was not made by Heng himself but by other Gongjia family craftsmen, the quality was still better than a normal sword. Xiao Xian's sword was fast and powerful. It broke the robber's knife in half. However, Xiao Xian's sword was chipped. He didn't look, didn't stop, and sliced the neck of the robber who was about to ambush them. Scarlet blood sprayed out, splashing onto the bodies of the other assassins. However, they didn't feel any fear just because one person died, nor did they feel any regret or sorrow. They were like heartless killers. Guang Yi's face was dark. He didn't hold back at all. He didn't care who sent them, or which faction they belonged to. Since they wanted to steal their goods, they couldn't blame him for being ruthless. This was what he used to deal with when he led a team on a trade trip. Not to mention, the enemy was coming at them aggressively, each strike deadly. Guang Yi's first strike sent the person flying. Before the opponent could attack again, Guang Yi's second strike came, cutting off the opponent's arm. He wanted to cut the person in half but there were too many people around. Guang Yi's strike did not achieve the desired effect. He flipped over and kicked the person behind him. He was anxious too. One was Xiao Xian's safety. Another was the seeds Xiao Xian had with him. They were all good seeds from Jiju. They were very rare. Could it be that the robber's target was the seeds? Or maybe, the 1,000-grain gold? Of the 11 robbers, 2 were crippled and 1 was dead. The remaining 8 continued to surround Xiao Xian and Guang Yi. Of the 4 robbers surrounding Guang Yi, one of them charged towards Xiao Xian. A cold light pierced through his waist. If not for Xiao Xian's quick reaction, he would have been impaled. However, even if Xiao Xian dodged, the rope of the pouch hanging from his waist was cut. Before Xiao Xian could snatch the animal skin bag that flew out, a few more silhouettes appeared and blocked Xiao Xian's path. The bag that flew out was knocked away by one of the silhouettes with a sword and landed in another person's hand. Not far away, a cart carrying crops passed by. It was a cart carrying crops from the fields to the royal city. There were even guards beside the cart. There were a lot of caravans like this recently. No matter who they were, if they saw the Golden Grain Fields cart in trouble, they would definitely help. Go! Seeing that there were people coming, the robbers stopped fighting. They abandoned the wooden cart and the half-dead cart and quickly retreated. Their movements were as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, they were quite a distance away. When the caravan on the dirt road arrived, the robbers were already gone. Guang Yi wanted to chase after Xiao Xian's pouch but was stopped by Xiao Xian. Let them take it if they want. Don't chase. But, inside the pouch, there are no seeds or 1,000-grain gold inside, said Xiao Xian. Isn't that the pouch you always carry? Guang Yi was confused. Yes, but it's just a pouch. I've already changed the things inside. Guang Yi calmed down. If it's not seeds or 1,000-grain gold, then what's in the pouch? Something good from the manager before we left, said Xiao Xian. At the Golden Grain Fields, Jiju's yellow earth wanted to run out when it heard the bull's cry. As the boss, it had to protect its underling when it was being bullied. If it wasn't for Ji-ju who came out to eat, the gates of the fields would have been smashed open by the giant bull. He didn't let Yellow Earth out, but Ji-ju asked the manager to send people over to check on the situation. How dare they rob the Golden Grain Farm's carriage? The manager was furious. He had just promised Xiao Xian not long ago, and now something had happened. It was like a slap to his face. However, by the time the head manager sent people over, the other party had already seen that the situation was not good and had fled. If it wasn't for the mess on the ground and the bull's cries, he would have thought nothing had happened. They didn't find any clues on the dead culprit. In an inconspicuous courtyard in the royal city, 2 guards rushed into a house. Young Lord Yen and the others. Before the guard could finish speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. With a bang, the door was kicked open. Ji Yen, what do you want? Ji Jing shouted angrily when she saw the intruder. The people beside her also stepped forward to protect Ji Jing. Ji Yen looked at the people beside Ji Jing and stared straight at her. You sent people to steal Xiao Xian's pouch during the road closure. Panic flashed across Ji Jing's eyes, but she quickly calmed down. What nonsense are you talking about? I didn't send anyone. You didn't touch your own people. You borrowed someone else's hand. Don't talk about me. Aren't you eyeing that pouch too? How else would you know the situation over there? While the two of them were arguing, another person rushed in from outside, still gasping for breath. Ji Jing's eyes lit up when she saw the person. However, before she could say anything, Ji Yen reached out and snatched the pouch hidden in the person's robe. Ji Yen, how dare you steal my stuff? Ji Jing brought the people beside her over to fight for it. While the two sides were fighting over the pouch, someone grabbed the rope tied to the mouth of the pouch and pulled. Bang! The contents of the pouch spilled out like a cannon. The small room was instantly filled with the pungent smell of organic fertilizer, and the powder was sprinkled on everyone's body. There was a strong smell of nature in the air. Ji Yen, who was holding the pouch, Ji Jing, who was sprayed with the stench, everyone in the house turned green. Where was the promised treasure? Chapter 448. Everyone in the room had mixed feelings. Ji Yen froze with the bag. No matter how stupid he was, he knew he had been played. It wasn't just him who wanted to play the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The planner and executor of this incident were all fooled. He threw the bag in his hand in disdain at the equally shocked Ji Jing in front of him. Holding his breath, Ji Yen left with his men in large strides. They also had fields outside King City, but they were used to enjoying life since they were young and rarely went to their own fields. Even if they did go, they would not do it themselves. They would just watch others farm and sit in King City to count the results. If it were not for the secret that Ji-ju had been hiding, they would not have gone to the fields previously. They would avoid the smelly fertilizer and had never been treated like this before. After Ji Yen left with a cold expression, Ji Jing smashed everything in the room that could be smashed. After she was done, she remembered why she was smashing things in this smelly room. So she changed to a clean room and continued to vent. When she was almost done, she called Luzha over and gave him a good scolding. Luzha was the driver of Ji Jing's carriage when she went to the Golden Grain Fields. At the time, Luzha was trying to please Ji Jing, but unexpectedly, he ran into Xiao Xian and Black Bear. This time, because of the Lu family's Lubi being beaten up, Luzha heard from his tribesmen that the Lu family was thinking of revenge. Then Ji Jing gave him a mission. So he went to find some people. These people would do things for money and had already formed a group. They were tight-lipped and wouldn't leak information about their customers. They had met before the Lu family moved to the royal city and moved to the royal city together. So when Ji Jing gave them a mission, Luzha went to find them. With Ji Jing around and a generous reward, these people were happy to do it. Ji Jing only wanted the animal skin bag Xiao Xian carried around, but Lu Jia had ordered his men to kill Xiao Xian because of Lubi. But who would have thought that after losing one and injuring several others, not only did they fail to kill the person, even the bag that they snatched back turned into a poop bag. It was no wonder that Ji Jing would be angry. Even Lu Jia was holding back his anger. Running into those people again and again, they were unlucky. It was simply a disaster. After smashing things and cursing to her heart's content, Ji Jing led her subordinates back. She had to clean up the stench on her body. Although she had changed and washed, the stench was too strong. After washing, the stench was not strong, but it persisted. Even wearing fragrant flowers could not cover it up. After Ji Jing left, Lu returned to the Linlu tribe's place in the royal city. "How is it?" Lu Ming, who had been waiting for a long time, asked. In fact, when he saw Lu Jia's gloomy face, he knew that things weren't going well. But he still wanted to know how things were going. Lu Jia told him everything he knew. "I didn't expect that kid to be so lucky." This was within Lu Ming's expectations. How could someone who could beat Lubi up be killed so easily? Lubi's hammer is still the chief's. The patriarch personally went to the Gongjia family to ask for it. When they were in the tribe, they called him the chief. Now that they were in the royal city, they called him the patriarch. Are we going to let that kid go just like that? Lu Jia was unwilling. Now that the kid has left the golden grain fields, I'm worried that he'll leave the royal city. Once he leaves, it'll be difficult to find him. Don't worry. Lu Ming smiled. He won't be able to leave. Seeing Lu Jia's confusion, Lu Ming explained, the patriarch plans to do it himself. After Xiao Xian beat up Lubi, the Lu family had lost a lot of face in the royal city. Even now, people in the royal city still talked about Lubi being beaten up. The Lu family could not take this lying down. They did not want to waste any more time, so they had to resolve this quickly. Hence, after some consideration, the current chief of the Linlu tribe, the patriarch, decided to do it himself. If there were still some Yanjiao tribesmen in the royal city, they would not have made such a rash decision. After all, based on past experience, the Yanjiao tribesmen were not easy to deal with. Even the aristocrats of the 6 tribes had suffered losses. However, they now knew that there were only 2 Yanjiao tribesmen in the royal city. They were the 2 they met. Since there were only 2 of them, things would be easier. The black bears? That was not a problem. The black bears were few in number after all. Now that the Linlu tribesmen were all here, the Lu family had more confidence. If only they had succeeded last time. When he thought about what happened at the Gongjia entrance, hatred flashed across Lu Ming's eyes. However, this would be resolved soon. He began to plan how to restore the Lu family's reputation after dealing with the 2 Yanjiao tribesmen. The royal city people who liked to watch drama were forgetful. They would only remember the final result. Last time, the Lu family lost to Xiao Xian, but if they won the next time, the royal city's reputation would change. As for bullying the weak with numbers, there was no such thing here. Even if there was, they would not admit it. They believed that the final winner would rule everything. Xiao Xian did not know that the Lu family was plotting against him. After he and Guang Yi were attacked, the manager of the Golden Grain Fields sent a new bullock cart over with a few guards. The guards and bullock cart only returned after they sent Xiao Xian and Guang Yi to the city gates. When Xiao Xian arrived at the Black Bear's outpost, Black Bear had just returned. "Xiao Xian, you're back just in time. Master Tianheng sent someone to say that your sword and knife are ready. You can take them when you come back." Black Bear was overjoyed because Gongjia Heng had promised to make him an axe. However, it would be delayed and the price would be higher. Black Bear had no objections. He was lucky enough to have Master Heng make him a weapon. Gold leaves were nothing. He could earn more if he didn't have them. "It's ready. I was just thinking of getting a new sword." Xiao Xian was overjoyed. His sword was chipped, so it was inconvenient to continue using it. It was a good time to get a new one. He was thinking that it would be great if there were good stones around so he could make a few more swords. He could polish the chipped sword and continue using it. Unfortunately, other than the good stones at the city gates, he did not see any good stones around. I've just finished my business. I'll go with you. Xiao Xian, what's wrong with your sword? Did you get into a fight in the fields? Black Bear turned to look at Guang Yi's sword. There were also many scratches on the blade. If there were scratches like that, it was definitely not a small fight. A few more hits and the sword would break. Xiao Xian briefly explained the situation to Black Bear. Black Bear was silent for a moment. His smile faded and he said sternly, Xiao Xian, I advise you to leave the royal city as soon as possible. Almost all the people from the Linlu tribe have moved here. Once things settle down, I'm worried that they will attack you. Xiao Xian, you don't know this, but while you were at the golden grain fields, some of our people managed to sneak in. If it weren't for the tight security, someone would have stolen our stuff. Especially the grain cellar and the crypt. Your grains are all in there. For the 1,000 grain gold, whispered Guang Yi. No, not completely. That's just one of the reasons. More importantly, you've been targeted. More things might happen in the future, said Black Bear. It was hard to find a chance to deal with Black Bear, but it was much easier to deal with Xiao Xian. After all, Xiao Xian did not have a place to stay here. Plus, he was alone. I understand. Xiao Xian had already thought of this when he was attacked. Now that he had met Heng and learned about the 1,000 grain gold, it was time to leave. It was more dangerous to stay here. Why don't you leave tomorrow? Mauda was supposed to leave in 3 days, but since you're in trouble, you should leave earlier, said Black Bear. Thank you. Sai, you're welcome. I even used you to get some golden grains and met Master Heng. This is nothing. Black Bear chuckled. When Xiao Xian arrived at Gongjia Heng's place to get the sword, Heng was busy in the forging room, so Xiao Xian did not see him. However, Heng had already instructed his apprentices to bring him the sword and knife he had made. There were also a few decent weapons, all axes. When Heng was at the Yanjiao tribe, he had heard that tribesmen preferred axes when they hunted. This time, he asked his apprentices to forge some axes for Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian took the sword and opened the cloth wrapping it, revealing the golden blade. Compared to before, the golden color of the blade was lighter, but Xiao Xian felt that it was sharper. The patterns on the blade had changed. Within the golden blade, the silver lines were like flames. He tossed a piece of wood the apprentice handed him to test the sword. The blade flashed and the wood, as thick as a forearm, was easily cut in half. Do you still want to try rocks? Asked the apprentice expectantly. No need, I know what to do. Xiao Xian put the sword away. After the modification, although the sword had been upgraded in all aspects, it might not be able to cut through rocks easily. Even if the blade was flawless, it would still be affected. For a sword like this, if the blade was damaged, it would be broken. If there was a chance in the future, Xiao Xian wanted to forge a sword for himself. A knife would be even better. However, the tribe's core seed was on the other side of the sea, and the core seed here was controlled by the 6 major tribes. The Gongjia family would not let outsiders take advantage of them. He did not know when he could go back. Xiao Xian sighed as he kept the sword. He asked Guang Yi, who was testing the knife next to him. How was it? Guang Yi's face was glowing. Very good. Thank Master Heng for me. Tell him that next time I have something good, I'll get the Black Bears to bring it over, Xiao Xian said to the apprentice. Black Bear was overjoyed. Their trading party was the connection between the Yanjiao tribe and Gongjia Heng. They were happy to be this connection as they benefited greatly from it. After taking the things and thanking him, Xiao Xian did not stay. Since they were leaving tomorrow, he should go back early to prepare. When he left the Gongjia residence, Ji Fang happened to be there. Xiao Xian greeted him and continued walking. After all, he wasn't familiar with this person. Unexpectedly, Ji Fang called out to him. Wait. Ji Fang turned around. If there's nothing else, please don't stay in Royal City. It was not a warning but a reminder. Xiao Xian and the other two understood. Chapter 449. Since Ji Fang said that, it meant this place was no longer safe. When they returned to the caravan, Black Bear told Xiao Xian his speculation based on Ji Fang's words and attitude. This time, the Linlu tribe was really going to make a move. However, the others would not interfere, they would just watch. Actually, in the eyes of the 6 aristocrats, this is nothing. Even Xiao Xian beating up Lubi, they'll just treat it as gossip. None of this was important enough for the 6 aristocrats to take seriously. So what if Xiao Xian beat up Lubi? What did that prove? Did it prove that the Yanjiao tribe was stronger than the Linlu tribe? No. A tribe's power was not determined by just 1 or 2 people. Plus, whether it was Xiao Xian or Lubi, the prodigy of the Linlu tribe, others might take a second look at them, but in the eyes of the aristocrats, they were just children playing around. This was also the reason why none of the influential figures of the 6 tribes had made an appearance until now. It was because they didn't care about these small squabbles. As for Xiao Xian's life, they did not care. In fact, they were happy to see Xiao Xian suffer. Just because they did not make a move did not mean they did not want to see others make a move. If the Yanjiao people were unlucky in the royal city, they would be happy too. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi listened to Black Bear's analysis. Actually, even if Black Bear did not say anything, Xiao Xian could guess. However, Guang Yi was different. He heard that the people here did not like the Yanjiao tribe and were happy to see the Yanjiao people suffer. They even looked down on their own tribe's elders. What kind of people were they? Pissed. Very pissed. But no matter how pissed they were, it was useless. They could only hold it in. Start a fight? Just the 2 of them, Yanjiao, against the people of the royal city? He was courting death. In the past, when Yanjiao came to the royal city, they always came in groups. With 100 or 200 people, their fighting power was great, and not many people dared to provoke them. As for now, who asked them to come with only 2 people? Even if he wanted to fight, he wouldn't be able to. Aggrieved, too aggrieved. The veins on Guang Yi's forehead were throbbing. He twisted his fingers a few times, but every time he almost reached the hilt of the knife, he would pull it back. He wanted to tear the house apart. But we're leaving tomorrow, so don't think too much about it, Black Bear comforted. Unfortunately, Black Bear's words did not work on Guang Yi. They had to leave the royal city every day. It was not because they wanted to leave, but because they were forced to leave by the situation. They had to leave with grievances and unhappiness. Actually, I'm worried that the Linlu tribe will stop you from leaving the city tomorrow, Black Bear said worriedly. When the roads were sealed off, the Linlu tribe must have sent someone to rob the golden grain fields. If he dared to do this, what else would he not dare to do? This might not be easy to deal with. As they spoke, someone came to report, the people watching the Linlu tribe said that there's something going on there. What do you mean? Black Bear's heart jumped. The person shook his head. We only know that the Lu family has been coming and going frequently. They suddenly went to give gifts to the 6 noble families. They seemed to be planning something. As for what they were planning, they could not find out. After all, they could not enter the core of the noble families. They could not find anyone to investigate further. Continue to keep an eye on them. Send more people. Black Bear said. Yes, sir. After the person left, Black Bear was even more worried. Maybe they've already made their move. Leaving the city tomorrow might not go smoothly. If the Linlu tribesmen stop the caravan when it leaves the city tomorrow, then we fight. Guang Yi gritted his teeth. If they were close to the tribe, he would have led his men to fight already. The tribe's survival depended on fighting. They could not retreat. If they took one step back, they would take a second step, a third step, until they were forced into an even more difficult situation. When his ancestors brought the tribe here, they had fought their way here. The place they lived in today was also won through hard work. Although Guang Yi was calm in the tribe, when it came to certain matters, he would not remain silent. However, Guang Yi was worried about Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's position in the tribe was special. The chief and shaman both valued him. Plus, Xiao Xian was the only one from his brother tribe on the other side of the sea. Guang Yi was not afraid of anything happening to him. Even if he died here, he would not complain. But Xiao Xian could not. Guang Yi was conflicted. His facial muscles were almost contorted. Seeing Guang Yi's reaction, Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian, what do you think? Black Bear knew that between the two, Xiao Xian was the one who made the decision. Plus, this kid had a lot of ideas. Maybe he could think of an easier way to avoid the Linlu tribe. Guang Yi looked over too. He actually hoped that Xiao Xian could think of a way to avoid them. But another voice was screaming, hoping that Xiao Xian's answer would be the same as his. It was extremely contradictory. Xiao Xian looked away from the window and said calmly, "Then we fight." The same answer as Guang Yi. Guang Yi did not know if he was proud or worried. He opened his mouth but remained silent. After receiving their answers, Black Bear sighed and shook his head. "Rest first. I'll bring people to escort you out of the city tomorrow." After Black Bear left, only Guang Yi and Xiao Xian were left. Guang Yi was conflicted. He wanted to persuade them, but before he could, Xiao Xian said, "Sleep early. You'll have energy to fight tomorrow." Guang Yi shut up. The next morning, Mao Da led the team leaving Royal City and loaded the goods onto the bears' backs. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi went over to help. "Did you sleep well last night?" Mao Da was worried that the two would lose sleep because of the Linlu tribe, but they did not look like they slept through the night. "Pretty good," Xiao Xian said, "thank you for your hospitality on this trip to Royal City." Don't mention it. Boss said we got a lot of benefits too," Mao Da said with a smile. Then he turned to check on the other bear. When he turned, the smile on his face disappeared. His eyes were filled with worry. The latest news was that the Lu family wanted to stop them. But it was better to wait for boss instructions and see if there was a better way. This time, the Linlu tribe's target was not the black bears, but the black bears would not abandon Xiao Xian and Guang Yi because of this. They had their principles too. If they abandoned Xiao Xian and Guang Yi, it would look like they were afraid of the Linlu tribe. Just because of this, they had to accept the challenge. Mao Da tugged on the bear's ear. Wasn't it just the Linlu tribe? What was there to be afraid of? Let's fight then. We'll continue what we didn't finish last time. At the royal city gates, the guards yawned as they opened the gates. They were about to stand at the side and chat with their companions when they saw a few familiar figures. Am I seeing things? Why is it young Master Jing from the Ji family? The guard was confused. This young master had never woken up so early. You don't know? Another person asked. Know what? It's not just young Master Jing. Many people from the 6 aristocratic families are here too. Another person pouted. The guard looked over, confused. There were a few beast carriages with aristocratic insignia. What day is it today? What are these young masters doing here so early? Watching a show, the guard said mysteriously. Show? What show? Who's going to dance or play with swords or sing? Tisk, you're not up to date. The guard said proudly. According to my sources, the Lu family invited them here. The Lu family? The new Lu family from the Linlu tribe? That's right, it's them. Once he heard that it was the Lu family from the Linlu tribe, the guard lost interest. Didn't they say that Lubi from the Lu family was beaten up? What's so good about the Lu family? You don't know. If they're beaten up, they won't beat them back. You mean, the guards discussed among themselves. Some of the aristocratic young masters had already climbed up the city walls and entered the towers on both sides of the city gates. Because huge beasts often entered and exited the royal city, there were no towers directly above the city gates. Instead, there were towers on both sides of the city gates. These aristocratic young masters had received gifts from the Lu family yesterday. Among the gifts was a letter inviting them to the towers to watch the show. Others might not be interested and came to join in the fun. But Ji Jing and Ji Yen were different. They came early and found a good spot in the towers. Outside the city gates, Yi was sleepily sitting in his family's cattle cart. As he neared the city gates, he shuddered. The atmosphere was not right. The roads near the fields were unsealed today and there would be more carriages. That was why he woke up early to enter the city. But before he entered, he noticed that something was amiss. Looking at the towers on the city walls, he saw many familiar faces early in the morning. What's going on? Yi signaled for the coachman to ask the guards at the city gates. Not many of the guards knew about this earlier, but now that the news had spread like wildfire, everyone knew about it. Seeing that they were from the Yi family and that they were being rewarded, they were in a good mood today. In their excitement, they told the people who came to ask about it. The coachman who came to ask questions went back to Yi to relay what the guards said. The Lu family. Yanjiao. Yi thought. He knew that the young man who went to the fields with Ji Ju that day was from the Yanjiao tribe. And there were only 2 Yanjiao tribesmen who came to the royal city. Young master, shall we continue? Asked the coachman. No, you drive the cart back. I'll go up and watch with them. Although Yi was a minor figure in the Yi family, as a descendant of the Yi family, he had the right to go up the city walls. Seeing that Yi had made his decision, the coachman could only follow. When Yi walked up the city walls, he noticed that many people had woken up early. Other than the Yi family, there were people from the other 5 families. Even the people who usually slept like pigs were yawning as they came over. Yi did not go into the tower. He could not squeeze in, so he could only watch from the outside. Actually, it was not a bad thing to watch from outside. Chapter 450. Not long after Yi stood still, another group of people walked up the wall. It was a few members of the Yi family. When they saw Yi, they were shocked. They did not expect to see Yi here. Yi's presence was too inconspicuous. If not for him, they would have forgotten that the Yi family had a person named Yi. Hey, isn't this Yi? Why aren't you farming in the fields? One of them asked with a smile, his eyes filled with mockery. The Yi family had the least amount of land among the 6 noble families. If they were to use the Ji family's label, they would be considered poor. Without land, no matter how much they had, they would still be poor. However, the Yi family did not think that way. They felt that only useless people would farm. The capable ones would just sit at home and collect money. Therefore, in the eyes of the Yi family members, Yi was the most capable one. Perhaps, 3 generations ago, these people might not have been able to compare to Yi's family. However, things were different now. No matter how useless they were, they could still sit on the street of divination. For people like Yi, who did not even have the skills to make a living on the street of divination, they could only rely on their ancestors' influence to get a small piece of land to pass their days. Therefore, when the Yi family members walked up the wall, they did not even look at Yi, who was now a marginal figure. Only the one who wanted to step on him said a few words. When he heard the other party's words, EC did not appear angry. Instead, he explained, I just came from the fields. I heard that there was a show here, so I came to take a look. The other party did not want to continue talking to EC. They still had to go to the tower and had already reserved seats for them. They would not stand outside in the cold wind like EC, who was like a guard at the city gate. But just as he was about to leave, the man caught a glimpse of the bag hanging on EC's waist. Then, he remembered that EC had said that he came from the field. Maybe there were gold leaves in the bag. He knew that EC would help people in the fields to make money every year. Looking at the big bag hanging on EC's waist, he knew that EC had made a lot of money this year. The man's eyes moved, and he turned his foot back to face EC. It's boring to just watch like this. Why don't we play something fun? That person said. For example. EC looked at him. Why don't we make a bet? I heard that the Lu clan is going to fight with someone. The man suddenly forgot who the other party was and only remembered the Lu clan. I heard that we have to deal with 2 Yanjiao soldiers. Isn't this a little inappropriate? EC asked with a frown. How is it inappropriate? Hasn't it always been like this? The man didn't think much of it. After all, he had seen this kind of thing many times before. In this world, people bullied the weak with numbers. If you didn't have enough people, you shouldn't cause trouble. If you did, you couldn't blame others for putting up a big fight to bully you. It didn't matter what the cause was, or whether the goal was what everyone said. The spectators didn't care. They were just bored and wanted to pass the time. Didn't the Lu clan lose before? I don't think they'll win this time, EC said. The man who was thinking about how to trick EC paused for a moment, then a big smile appeared on his face. So you think the Lu clan will lose? I think so. EC's tone was uncertain. Then let's make a bet. What are we betting on? A voice interrupted. Oh, it's Yi Bing. The man's tone was completely different from when he first called out EC. Now, he was trying to curry favor with Yi Bing. Yi Bing was wearing a gray fur robe with white edges. He had just led his men up the city walls when he heard someone mention a bet. Just as well, he was interested. Yi Bing was different from EC. He didn't have any land outside the city, but he had plenty of money. He was good at divination and most importantly, he had a good father. His status in the Yi family was naturally higher than EC's. We were just talking about today. EC said that the Lu clan lost once, so they'll definitely lose this time. EC's uncertainty turned into certainty. I didn't, before EC could finish, he was interrupted. That's why I was about to make a bet with him. The man interrupted, I bet that the Lu clan will win. Yi Bing had originally lost interest in such a low-level bet, but seeing how anxious EC was and the money pouch EC was carrying, he changed his mind. He clapped his hands, count me in. If the Lu clan wins, EC, your pouch of gold leaves belongs to us. If the Lu clan loses, I'll return you 5 pouches. Each pouch contains the same amount of money as the pouch you're carrying. How about that? He wasn't interested in EC's money, he just wanted to make things difficult for EC. But what if the fight doesn't start today? EC asked. It'll definitely start. The black bears are already on their way here. The 2 Yanjiao men are also there. We'll see them soon, Yi Bing said. EC was about to speak when the man beside him interrupted, it's decided then. Come on, EC, hand over your pouch first. Don't run away when the time comes. EC had no choice but to open his pouch reluctantly. As soon as he did, the other party snatched the pouch away and went to count the gold leaves. Alright, EC, we'll hold on to your pouch of gold leaves for now. When the Lu clan loses, I'll return it to you along with the bet. Yi Bing called the man who was counting the gold leaves and headed towards the tower. He didn't ask EC to join them. As he watched the group enter the tower, Yi-Si's anxious expression faded away. His eyes even flashed with joy. I'm rich. I'm rich. All the money I brought was worth it. 5 times. I won't have to keep an eye on the ground next year. After entering the tower, Yi Bing and his men went up another floor and found a good spot to watch the show from. It felt good indeed. Although he was sure that the Lu clan would win, Yi Bing still planned to perform a reading before the black bears showed up. He took out a pouch made of fine silk and animal skin from his inner pocket, poured out a few pieces of jade he used for his readings, and began. The more he did, the more sweat he broke out on his forehead. Bang! The pieces of jade hit each other. Yi Bing clutched them tightly, his face flushed red as he gasped for air. What's wrong? The others were shocked to see Yi Bing like this. Yi Bing shook his head, his expression unreadable. He didn't get anything. He didn't get any information at all. How could this be? Even if the reading failed, it shouldn't be that he couldn't get anything. How could this be? Seeing that Yi Bing's face was gloomy and he didn't want to say more, the others also stopped asking. They're coming. Someone shouted. The others stopped talking and looked towards the road. The huge bear's body swayed as it walked over step by step. They didn't need to look at the people to know who they were just by looking at the bears. The black bear caravan is here. They didn't avoid us. Didn't they say the Lu family was going to fight the Yanjiao people? Why are the black bears together? Someone didn't understand. The black bears are in cahoots with the flaming horns. I see. So the Lu family is fighting the black bears today? It must be. The Yanjiao people were automatically ignored. It didn't matter if you defeated Lubi or not. In front of the Lu family, 1 or 2 people wouldn't make much of a difference, at least in the eyes of the spectators. On the other side, Xiao Xian and the black bears were walking towards the city gates. On both sides of the road in front of the city gate, there were many onlookers. Some of them were from the Lu family. As if to prevent Xiao Xian from escaping, they glared at him, their eyes cold and aggressive, as if they were going to attack him at any moment. I didn't expect the Linlu tribe to be like this, Xiao Xian exclaimed. It's not too late to change paths now. I don't recommend continuing this way, Black Bear said seriously. He Xiong's expression was solemn. The Lu family knows that we're leaving today, so they've already mobilized many people just to block this city gate. You'll be at a disadvantage. Xiao Xian shook his head. Let's keep going. Black Bear sighed. Why was this person so stubborn? Why was he so stubborn? Although everyone knew what was going to happen, no one stopped. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the black bears and the merchants continued walking towards the city gates. When Xiao Xian reached the city gates, 2 groups of people rushed out from both sides, blocking the entrance. They looked at Xiao Xian like he was a hopping grasshopper. How dare you block my way? Black Bear took a large step forward, raising his hand to draw his sword, but Xiao Xian grabbed his arm. Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. Xiao Xian gestured behind him. Turning his head, Black Bear saw the person who was leading a group of people towards him. The leader was the current leader of the Linlu tribe, the head of the Lu family, Lu Zong. Lu Zong wasn't very tall, but he gave off an oppressive aura. The people standing next to him felt even more pressure than Lubi. At this moment, the current leader of the Lu family walked over with his men. He wasn't afraid of Xiao Xian escaping. Plus, there were Lu family members blocking the way. With so many people blocking the way, it wouldn't be easy to escape. He purposely let the 2 Yanjiao people walk to the city gates before leading his men out. He wanted them to experience the feeling of not being able to leave even though the exit was right in front of them. Today, he didn't plan on letting these 2 Yanjiao people leave alive. Even if the Yanjiao tribe found out, what could they do? Could they take revenge on the royal city? What a joke! If they hadn't moved to the royal city, the Lu family would have been worried when they heard about the Yanjiao tribe. But things were different now. They were in the royal city, in the territory of the 6 noble families. If they joined the 6 noble families, no matter how bad their relationship with Yanjiao got, the people of the royal city would still side with the Linlu tribe if they had to choose between the Yanjiao tribe and the Lu family. Everyone who came to watch the show would also side with the Lu family. Because they thought they had a strong backing, they didn't have to worry about being harassed by other tribes in the royal city. They didn't have to worry about the consequences, so they could act without fear. Lu Zong's gaze swept past Black Bear and stopped on Xiao Xian. His voice was icy. Today's matter is between the Lu family and the Yanjiao tribe. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Those who have nothing to do with it can leave now. What he meant was for the Black Bears to get out of the way. What was supposed to be a matter between 2 Yanjiao tribesmen was now a matter of the entire Yanjiao tribe. It sounded even more imposing. Black Bear smacked his lips and raised his hand at the people of the caravan. Listen up. Whoever dares to block our way, we'll cut them down 1 by 1, 2 by 2. If you cut down too many, you'll be rewarded with gold leaves and gold knives. When Black Bear first spoke, the Lu family thought he would ask the caravan to leave. They didn't expect him to say something like that. It was a direct provocation. Seeing the Lu family's expressions change, Black Bear asked loudly, "What did the ancestors say?" The people of the caravan shouted in unison, "We can't lose our momentum just because of the enemy's formation." Roar! The giant bear of the caravan bared its fangs and roared as well. Those who wanted to enter the city and those who wanted to leave, whether they were humans or beasts, were all frightened by the aura. Were the black bears for real? Wasn't it a feint like last time? This was a rare opportunity. They had to watch. Lu Zong's expression darkened. He realized that the black bears who had stayed behind to guard the royal city had arrived. In his heart, he didn't want to start a fight with the black bears here. Who knew that the black bears would insist on protecting the 2 Yanjiao tribesmen? Since when did the black bears have such a good relationship with the Yanjiao tribe? Just as Lu Zong was considering whether to start a fight with the black bears here, Xiao Xian spoke up. "I think this matter should be settled between me and the Linlu tribe's chief." Chapter 451. Xiao Xian's words were exactly what Lu Zong wanted. Even though he was prepared to fight the black bears, he would avoid them if he could. Fighting the black bears would cost him a lot. But if it was just one person, it would be much easier. Now that Xiao Xian had stepped up himself, it saved Lu Zong a lot of trouble. It would be great if he won, but if Lu Zong lost, someone else would step up to fight Xiao Xian. This was something they had discussed before. Lu Ming had told him that this was not shameless, it was strategy. Lu Bi had also said that the Yanjiao kid was too strange. If the Yanjiao tribe had such a powerful person, they would definitely kill him. There was no way they would let him go. Plus, even if Xiao Xian could beat Lu Zong, he would be badly injured. It would be easier for the others to fight. They just had to prevent the black bears from interfering. In just a few breaths, the Linlu tribe had made all sorts of preparations. Up until now, everything was going according to plan. "But I have a condition," Xiao Xian said. "Speak." Since things were going according to plan, and it was the easy way out, Lu Zong was in a good mood. "If you break the ground or walls, it's on you guys," Xiao Xian said. "Sure. As long as they could get rid of one problem, even if they made a dent in the city wall and cracked the thick stone slab at the city gate, they could just patch it up." This was not a difficult task. Xiao Xian and Lu Zong's voices were not soft. The people around them had good hearing and could hear them. Even the people on the towers could hear them. While Xiao Xian and Lu Zong were talking, 3 fruits flew out from one of the towers. They were aimed at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian tilted his head to avoid them. The orange-red fruits hit the ground, breaking open a hole. Some juice spilled out. It was very obvious on the gray stone slab. The people on the towers had woken up early to watch a good show. They wanted to see the Lu family fight the black bears. That was more satisfying, not a fight between two people. Just two people fighting, how boring would that be? Therefore, those who were in a bad mood threw fruits at Xiao Xian, who made this suggestion. However, some were looking forward to it. Xiao Xian had defeated Lubi easily. They wondered how he would fare against the head of the Lu family. Those who were smart already knew that whether or not Xiao Xian could beat Lu Zong, he would not be able to leave the city today. Interesting. Black Bear understood, which was why he didn't understand why Xiao Xian accepted the challenge. Why bother? Move to the side, Xiao Xian said to Black Bear and Guang Yi. Black Bear sighed. He did not try to persuade him anymore. It was useless anyway. He might as well let this kid suffer a little. At most, he would attack him when the situation changed. Move a little further, Xiao Xian said. What are you thinking? Black Bear said angrily. A little further, Xiao Xian said sincerely. Black Bear was speechless. If they moved far enough, would help be able to make it in time? Not just Black Bear, even Guang Yi was sent far away by Xiao Xian. We'll play it by ear, Xiao Xian said. What's the point of moving so far away? Black Bear had Mao Da lead the team further away. If they fought later, the goods would be damaged. Luckily, the area in front of the city gate was spacious. On the tower, Yi Bing took out the jade stone again. He wanted to see who would win in the battle between Xiao Xian and Lu Zong. Still, he could not tell. Lu Zong gave the people around him a look, telling them to keep an eye on Black Bear and not let him interfere. I am the current head of the Lu family, Lu Zong. Lu Zong stepped forward and announced loudly. He did not say what would happen if he won or lost. He only said his name for the people of Royal City to remember. Xiao Xian saw Guang Yi and the rest retreat and turned back. Yanjiao tribe, Elder Xiao Xian. Elder? Such a young elder. No wonder he could win against Lubi and force Lu Zong to fight personally. All the more reason to not let him go back alive. This was what the Lu clan members were thinking at the same time. A strong wind blew. Outside the city gate, the unharvested grains and weeds were blown in one direction by the wind. Inside the city gate, it was eerily quiet. The atmosphere was tense. You're young, so I'll let you go first, said Lu Zong, as if he was giving in. In fact, compared to attacking, he was more adept at defending and making the most powerful counterattack against his opponent's attacks. No need. You're old. Let me go first. Xiao Xian did not move from his spot. Lu Zong was not that old. He was not an old man. He looked about the same age as Guang Yi. He just learned to call himself old man after coming to Royal City. Lu Zong was stunned, then smirked as if mocking Xiao Xian. Deep down, he was wary. What made this kid so confident? However, if he made the first move, then so be it. Why should he be afraid of this kid? But, you're not going to take out your sword? Lu Zong looked at Xiao Xian suspiciously. Didn't Gong Jiaheng make a sword for this kid? Why would I need a sword to deal with you? Xiao Xian continued to stand there. Not just Lu Zong, but Xiao Xian's words made Black Bear and Guang Yi frown. The people around them were spitting on the inside. That kid, he's too pretentious. Xiao Xian's reaction made the Lu family members wonder. Something was wrong. Something was definitely wrong. Were there other Yanjiao people around? Lu Zong glanced at the Lu family members nearby. When they nodded, he did not think too much. Everything was set up. Things were going according to plan. What was there to be suspicious about? Since you're not going to use your sword, I won't use my sword either. He was not used to using a sword anyway. Lu Zong's eyes shone brightly. Totemic patterns appeared on his face, making his face look even more ferocious. The meridians on his arms bulged. His thick legs made a crunching sound when he stepped on the ground. On his interlocked arms, his 10 fingers formed a strange shape, making a series of cracking sounds. It was as if each finger contained an enormous amount of power. His breath turned from hoarse to sharp, like the neighing of a deer. Bang! Luzong's figure leapt off the ground, heading straight for Xiao Xian. His 10 fingers looked like the giant antlers of a ferocious deer in the forest. They carried a chilling murderous intent as they enveloped their target, locking him in place. He was just waiting for the final hit to pierce through his prey. Just as Luzong was about to attack, Xiao Xian's totemic power surged to its peak. Thick blue flames surged out of his mind, passing through the light shield outside the totemic flames. With the force of a tidal wave, it rushed into the bone ornament hanging in front of his chest. His life force suddenly erupted, and a vast amount of power seemed to flow into every muscle, every bone, and every meridian in his body. His muscles felt like they were being pricked by needles. His blood felt like it was burning. His bones were shaking. This was the price to pay for such power. The flame-shaped totemic patterns covered Xiao Xian's entire body. Xiao Xian spread his legs, his right hand reaching out in the direction of Luzong's charge. He was going to meet force with force. He's overestimating himself. Everyone had the same thought. The people of the Lu family were best at fighting head-on. Ji Yan and Ji Jing, who were sitting in the tower, panicked. They had the same idea. They wanted to help Xiao Xian when he was at his weakest. If he agreed to tell them the secret of the farm, they would continue to help. But now, there was no chance for them to help. He was going to be killed. Anyone with a brain would have dodged such a ferocious attack. Choosing not to use a weapon, not to dodge, but to stand there and meet Luzong head-on was the height of stupidity. Did he grow up eating fertilizer? However, Luzong, who was charging towards Xiao Xian, could feel the change in the person standing there. The air around him seemed to thicken, then freeze. It was as if everything was going to be shredded. Luzong's heart raced. He couldn't retreat even if he wanted to. His momentum was unstable. He felt like he was facing a tidal wave that wanted to break through everything. Xiao Xian stood there. After his momentum exploded, it was like an avalanche. It was vast and powerful, crashing towards Luzong. Xiao Xian's arm was covered in flames. They surrounded and formed, covering his entire arm. Guang Yi, whose brows were knitted together, was shaken. He jumped 10 meters away but felt it wasn't enough. He retreated even further. Boom, the two forces collided. It was as if all the clouds were going to be blown away by the roar of thunder. It shook the ground and shocked everyone. It wasn't just scary. Even the giant bear carrying the goods stood up in shock. It accidentally fell backwards. Luckily, it had the goods to support it. It landed on its butt. Visible waves of air twisted, exploding outwards from the point of collision. The stone floor seemed to melt. It started to collapse from Xiao Xian's feet and spread outwards. The orange-red fruit that was thrown on the ground turned into a cloud of mist in the blink of an eye. The ground seemed to have a huge attractive force, and the orange-red mist smashed down violently. It was as if there was a huge invisible palm pressing down from the sky. At the edge of the depression, countless stone shards and dust flew into the air. The strong airflow blew away the gravel and dust. The people of the Lu family who were blocking the city gate were pushed off the ground by this powerful force. When they flew out, they could clearly hear cracking sounds coming from all over their bodies, and blood was oozing out from their pores. Those who were close were affected. Those who were far away felt their scalps tighten. A chill ran down their spines. The tall city walls endured the impact of the wind. It was as if they were facing waves after waves. It was also as if they were being rammed by a giant beast. Inside the tower, tables, stools, kettles, and cups were all sent flying high into the air before falling heavily to the ground, breaking and smashing into pieces. Lu Zong, who was closest to the attack, was sent flying the moment he collided with Xiao Xian's palm. The people of Royal City looked up, watching Lu Zong fly over their heads. Their eyes followed the shadow in the air, watching him fly further and further away. In the limited memories of this generation of Royal City citizens, the image of Lubi being chased by someone with a hammer had long been blurred. But this scene at the city gate was etched deeply in their minds. When the air settled, the surroundings were eerily quiet. Crack, 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 clear cracks appeared on the tall city walls. The cracks were like vines growing vigorously. They branched out and continued to spread outwards. Chapter 452. Inside the tower, the people who were flustered by the tremors froze when they heard the cracking sound. They looked towards the source of the sound. In the tower, where the shockwave had turned the place into a mess, some people were lying on their stomachs while others were leaning against the stone pillars. After hearing the sound, the person leaning against the thick stone pillar gasped for breath. His eyes widened as he stared blankly at the stone pillar, as if he had seen something incredible. A crack appeared on the stone pillar and extended from bottom to top. Like an unstoppable snake, it passed under his hand and rushed to the top. Feeling the trembling under his hand, the person did not care about anything else and ran. Run! This place is going to collapse. As if a line of fire had been ignited, a commotion broke out. Without tidying up their clothes and hair, the people in the tower rushed out one by one. Ka, ka ka ka, rumble, small stones rolled down, and stone chips and dust fell from above. Then, more and more stones fell, and the small stones turned into large stone slabs. Finally, with a loud bang, the large stone slabs that built the tower all those years ago cracked and collapsed. The rumbling sound woke the people of the royal city from their shock. But they did not know what to do. They just stepped back and watched the towers on both sides of the city gate collapse bit by bit. The guards at the city gate saw that the situation was not good and had already retreated. With a loud bang, a large stone fell to the ground, bringing with it a cloud of dust. The people who were close to it saw a blur and had to raise their hands to block it. EC stood on the city wall. His position was very clever. One step away from him, a crack spanned across the city wall, as if separating two worlds. On the other side of the crack, EC did not suffer much impact. And when he saw that the situation was not good, he crouched down and hid behind the wall. Compared to the people in the tower who were affected, he was much better. EC was secretly pleased. Fortunately, he stood far away. However, now that everyone was panicking, he couldn't stay calm alone. Thus, when the people in the tower hurriedly ran out, he also screamed and ran with Yi Bing. He won the bet, but Yi Bing hadn't given him the money he promised. The Lu family's original plan was for Lu Zong to kill Xiao Xian and be done with it. If Lu Zong couldn't kill Xiao Xian, they could just find someone else to kill. However, they had already made plans for Lu Zong's defeat. They didn't expect the process to be like this and the ending to be so shocking. It was just one exchange, one palm strike, and it was over. They didn't even notice where Lu Zong was sent flying. They didn't even know if he was dead or alive. Continue to send people to fight? Everyone in the Lu family hung their heads low, afraid that they would be called. The other party had sent Lu Zong flying so easily. What could they do if they went? Continue to be sent flying? The city walls were cracked, and the towers had collapsed. How could they withstand it? One could imagine the consequences. Thus, none of them were willing to be sacrificed. Over at the caravan, Mauda finally closed his almost dislocated jaw. He called out to the caravan to calm the bears. One of them was still on the ground and hadn't recovered. The goods on its back were scattered. Fortunately, the bags were tightly tied and the grains inside didn't spill out. Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian with a complicated expression. It was as if he had never really known this person. The first time he saw Xiao Xian in an city, Xiao Xian had easily stopped the cauldron. The second time he saw Xiao Xian in the royal city, Xiao Xian had chased after Lubi with his heavy hammer. And now, they didn't even know if Lu Zong was dead or alive. The city gates were destroyed, 2 towers had collapsed. Was this even done by a human? Was this really Xiao Xian? Was he actually a mutated beast? Recalling what Xiao Xian had said to Lu Zong before he attacked, Black Bear suspected that this kid had planned all of this from the start. All the destruction would be shouldered by the Lu family while he just walked away. Guang Yi jumped in front of Xiao Xian and asked, "Elder, are you alright?" In the tribe, the shamanists had specially cleared out a space for Xiao Xian to practice. The others didn't know why, but Guang Yi had seen it once. He hadn't been close enough to feel it. He only knew that every time Xiao Xian practiced, there would be a hole in the ground. The shamanists said it was the power of their ancestors. Now, Guang Yi finally understood the extent of this power. Xiao Xian slowly retracted his arm and shook his head. "I'm fine." Xiao Xian scanned the crowd. Everyone, whether they knew him or not, quickly looked away, not daring to meet his eyes. Especially the Linlu tribesmen. When Xiao Xian's gaze swept past them, they shrank back, afraid that Xiao Xian would point them out to continue the fight. Xiao Xian stood there without moving. He spoke to Guang Yi for a while before moving away. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave immediately. His legs were numb. If he moved, people would easily see that Xiao Xian's unscathed and strong appearance was all an act. Every time he used the bone ornament's power, his body would be injured to a certain extent. However, compared to when he was at Gongjia Mountain, he was much better now. He was more familiar with controlling his power and knew what would happen if he attacked. In the past, he had always practiced alone. When he clashed with Lu Zong, his internal organs were injured, but it wasn't too serious. Maintaining his composure, Xiao Xian asked Mao Da, "Can we leave the city now?" Yes, said Mao Da quickly. In the past, he would joke around with Xiao Xian, but after seeing Xiao Xian send Lu Zong flying, Mao Da no longer dared to joke around with Xiao Xian. He hadn't adjusted his mindset yet. Hurry and leave. Since the Lu family said they'll take care of the city gates, we don't have to worry, said Black Bear. If the group stayed, they might not be able to leave. Xiao Xian thanked Black Bear sincerely and left with Mao Da and the rest. The Lu family in the city didn't chase after them and the guards didn't stop them. The Lu family members lying in ambush outside the city looked at each other. No one dared to approach them. They watched as the giant bears walked past them. When Xiao Xian passed by, the people closest to him shuddered. At the same time, in other parts of the royal city, the people who didn't take the Lu family and Xiao Xian seriously were shocked when they heard the truth. In the palace, a few people hurried in. They'd received the news too. Actually, they'd sensed an aura that made their hair stand on end. Yanjiao people. Yanjiao tribes? Why are they always there? Said an old man with white hair, frowning. When did the Yanjiao people become so strong? I heard it's a Yanjiao elder. He's very young. Someone remembered the words left by the master of the Yi family years ago. His heart skipped a beat. Could the great change be referring to the Yanjiao tribes? Now that I think about it, the Yanjiao tribes seem to be from another place. This foreign tribe is a great threat. I said so years ago. For a moment, everyone present was silent. They felt that it was really possible. While the people of the royal city were discussing the Yanjiao threat, Xiao Xian had already left the royal city. He walked out of the long dirt road outside the royal city and entered the forest again. Not to mention the giant bears, even Xiao Xian was much more relaxed. Mao Da, let me borrow your bear, said Xiao Xian. Mao Da was thinking about further cooperation with the Yanjiao tribes. Today's events showed that the Yanjiao tribes were much more powerful than they'd imagined. Cooperating with a tribe like this would benefit them greatly. Not to mention, Xiao Xian knew Master Heng and Ji Zhu. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Mao Da paused his thoughts. He was confused. Borrow the bear? For what? To eat? He'd heard that the Yanjiao people liked to eat giant beasts. Every time they exhausted themselves, they liked to eat large amounts of beast meat. Let me sit on your bear for a while. I want to take a nap, said Xiao Xian. Mao Da's eyes flashed. He knew that Xiao Xian wasn't as good as he looked. Waving his hand, Mao Da said, Go ahead. Pick whatever you want. Xiao Xian chose the one closest to him. It was the one that had tried to attack him when he first met the giant bear. Seeing Xiao Xian approach, the bear shuddered and tried to avoid him. However, Xiao Xian had already flipped onto the bear's back. Thus, the bear's walking posture was very stiff. Its forelegs were messed up and it almost tripped over itself. If it had only been wary of Xiao Xian before, now it was terrified of Xiao Xian. However, seeing that Xiao Xian didn't do anything after getting on the bear's back, it gradually calmed down. Xiao Xian needed a good rest to heal the injuries in his body. After withstanding such a huge force, from his neck to his shoulders, from every muscle to every bone, it was as if they were blocked from operating. Every movement was difficult, and the feeling of heaviness in his body became more and more obvious. However, with his recovery ability, he would feel much better after a good sleep. That was why he had decided to rest on the bear's back when no one was watching them after leaving Royal City. Guang Yi didn't speak. He stood guard beside the giant bear. At the same time, he was thinking. If Xiao Xian was so powerful, could he find a way to the other side of the sea? The shamaness and chief had placed their hopes on Xiao Xian. In the past, Guang Yi had his doubts, but now, he felt that it was possible. He was also very interested in the other side of the sea. When he was in the tribe, his old friends would talk about the other tribe when they ate meat. It had been 1,000 years, but the people of Yanjiao did not have deep feelings for this land. The shamaness said this was not where they should be, so they did not feel a sense of belonging. If an outsider attacked the tribe, Guang Yi and the others would defend the tribe. However, if they couldn't defend and the shamaness and chief decided to move, they would be a little emotional but not too emotional. Every year, they would hear news of other tribes migrating. Some moved from the wilderness to places with more people. Some were forced to leave the land they had lived on for hundreds of years and move into the mountains. When the fire seed no longer took root, it was as if the people had no roots. They floated and fell wherever they went. Some tribes scattered and could never gather again. Some tribes changed, just like the Linlu tribe. What would happen to the Yanjiao tribe in the future? Guang Yi looked at the yellowed leaves falling from the forest and felt emotional. Chapter 453. The caravan to Amba City encountered a lot of robbers along the way. They probably knew that there were more grain shipments at this time, so when they saw the large bags of suspected grain in the caravan, even if the robbers were afraid of the Black Bear caravan, they were still greedy and risked their lives. The caravan never showed mercy to robbers. If they let them go this time, they would continue to be beaten next time. If they knew that they were from the Black Bear caravan and still came out to rob them, then sorry, they would kill them. Therefore, in order to reduce future trouble, the caravan's people were absolutely ruthless. However, there were many robbers every year. When one group was slaughtered, another group would come out. Some robbers weren't forced to make a living, they just felt that robbing was easier. The giant bears of the Black Bear caravan, although they looked a little timid in front of Xiao Xian, were ferocious in the face of robbers. Xiao Xian saw the giant bears directly tear people in half several times, but they rarely ate human flesh. If the giant bears were hungry, the caravan's people would find food for them. These giant bears had a wide range of food, from grass shoots, berries, ants, bird eggs, river fish, and so on. Sometimes they would follow the caravan's people to eat the prey they brought back. They would even eat a little of the half-rotten beast's corpse that had been bitten to death by other beasts on the road. Fortunately, most of the places they passed through were mountains and forests, and there was a lot of food around, so they would not starve on the road. After 2 or 3 days of rest, Xiao Xian had almost recovered. Some of the prey he hunted was also given to the caravan. The giant bear that carried him for 3 days was also rewarded a lot, so much so that the giant bear would approach Xiao Xian to ask for food when it saw him. The caravan walked all the way to the Black Bear Caravan's stronghold outside Amba City. The giant bears carried the goods up the mountain. The caravan's people would not enter the city immediately. They would first unload the goods they brought back from the royal city here, then transport them bit by bit into Amba City. Xiao Xian brought 8 bags of grain from the royal city this time. Ji Zhu gave Xiao Xian 10 bags of golden grain from the golden grain fields, sold 2 bags to the Black Bear Caravan, and brought the remaining 8 back. Of course, the most important thing was the good seeds he brought back from Ji Zhu. These had to be kept well. There were also some axes from Gongjiaheng. They had to bring back a lot of goods. Let's wait for a few days. It's almost winter now. The tribe will come to Amba City again to sell the animals' skins they've stockpiled. Then we'll go back with them, suggested Guang Yi. Guang Yi was worried about being robbed. He and Xiao Xian would not be able to take care of the goods. The Black Bear Caravan would not escort them all the way to the tribe, so it was best to wait here for a few days. They should be able to meet the tribe's trading team soon. Xiao Xian thought about it and agreed. He had followed the trading team out around this time last year. If Duo Kong brought a trading team to Amba City, the Black Bear Caravan would definitely know. Xiao Xian asked Mao Da to help ask around. So far, no trading team had come. Then let's continue waiting, decided Xiao Xian. They left the goods at the Black Bear Caravan's trading point outside Amba City. It was safer here than inside the city. When Mao Da brought the goods to Amba City, he said to Xiao Xian, "You guys stay here for now. If I see any Yanjiao people, I'll send a message." There was nothing much to do in the city, so Xiao Xian and Guang Yi stayed at the Black Bear Caravan's trading point outside Amba City. However, they were not staying for free. During the day, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi would go hunting and bring back some of the game to the Black Bear Caravan. 5 days passed just like that. There was still no news from the trading team. Did something happen? Guang Yi was worried. In the past, although the time of the tribe's trading team was not fixed every year, it was always the same few days. In the past, the trading team was rarely delayed for too long, unless something happened that delayed their travel time. Luckily, they did not see any Taihe people. If they only saw Taihe and not Yanjiao, then something must have happened to Yanjiao. Let's continue waiting. If we still don't see them in 5 days, we'll go back first, decided Xiao Xian. On the 4th day after Xiao Xian said that, Mao Da finally sent someone to inform them that Yanjiao and Taihe's trading team had arrived. There did not seem to be anything wrong. Xiao Xian was slightly relieved. The messenger led Xiao Xian to a place outside Amba City. There were also people who went to transport the goods. Yanjiao and Taihe's trading team brought a lot of furs. They had to move the goods. At the same place, in the same forest, Xiao Xian saw Duo Kang's team. Seeing that everyone was safe, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi sighed in relief. Seeing Xiao Xian and Guang Yi, Duo Kang was overjoyed. "You're finally back." The rewards were secondary. Coming back alive was the most important thing. "What's wrong? Why are you guys so late?" asked Xiao Xian. Duo Kang's joy faded as he shook his head. "Just a small matter. We'll talk about it when we get back." "Oh right, what are you guys carrying?" Guang Yi ordered his men to move the grains and weapons over from the black bears. When he heard Duo Kang's words, he couldn't help but smile. These are all good stuff. Then he shouted at the Yanjiao men, be careful. After trading with the black bears, the trading team took a short break and headed back with the goods they had exchanged. This time, the team was bigger. Xiao Xian was not worried about being robbed. Although there were some robbers along the way, it was still considered smooth sailing. On the way, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi told Duo Kang about the royal city. Other than the 1,000-grain gold, they picked out a few details. Some things were better left unsaid on the road. Other than the Yanjiao people, there were also Taihe people around. Why did you guys delay the trade? Asked Guang Yi. He knew that Duo Kang didn't tell them because he didn't want others to hear. Now that the black bears were gone, Duo Kang didn't have to hide it anymore. It's about the salt, said Duo Kang. Duo Kang said, it's because something happened at the salt mine that we and the people from Taihe had to postpone the trade. Most of the salt used by the tribe was obtained from a salt mine. That salt mine was divided among the 5 tribes. Those who didn't get a share of the cake could only trade with these 5 tribes. Yanjiao and Taihe were 2 of the 5 tribes. It was the result of the battle for the salt mine. Other than the Flaming Horn and Taihe tribes, the other 3 tribes were the Fox tribe, Mountain Wind tribe and Shin tribe. Xiao Xian knew about this. Is it settled? Asked Xiao Xian. Duo Kang shook his head. The Fox and Shin tribes want to take over the salt mine. Mountain Wind has already fought with them, but they're very determined this time. Plus, they've found some allies. It's not easy to deal with them. No matter what, we'll talk about it when we get back. Let's see what the chief decides. If we're going to war, we have to prepare well this winter. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi grew serious. War was no small matter, especially when it involved 5 tribes. When they finally saw Yanjiao's not-so-tall mountain, Xiao Xian's tense nerves finally relaxed. Whether it was in the royal city or on the road, he always had to be on guard. Here, he could finally relax, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. There were some children feeding ducks by the river. When they saw the trading team, they ran over to greet them. Some of their elders were in the team. Elder Xiao Xian. A child ran towards Xiao Xian, looking very excited. He couldn't even stop running when he reached Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian picked the child up and put him on his shoulder. People in the tribe often did this, including the chief and Xiao Xian. Sometimes, Xiao Xian would do the same. Xiao Xian knew this kid. He was the second person to get a duck egg from the river. Others rarely got one, but he got one on his first try. After that, he was very active in feeding the ducks. Being put on Xiao Xian's shoulder, the child was a little embarrassed. Then, he excitedly took out an egg from his pocket. A duck egg? Eggs are still around. The duck eggs that could hatch had already hatched into ducklings. These wild ducks weren't expected to lay eggs often. After all, they weren't domesticated. Other than 1 or 2 times a year, they wouldn't lay eggs. I found it by the river. The child's eyes were bright as he handed the egg to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian took the egg and looked at it carefully. It wasn't damaged, but it didn't look like it had been laid for a long time. Bai Dan, no, Bai Gua, Xiao Xian asked the child on his shoulder, when did you find this egg? This morning, in the bushes by the river. The child named Bai Gua pointed at Xiao Xian. There were more ducks swimming there. There were also new ducks. Xiao Xian didn't know which one had given birth to them. There are still eggs at this time. Duo Kang was also surprised. The ducklings were all grown up. They hadn't heard of anyone finding an egg in the tribe. How was this child so lucky? Bai Gua, you should just change your name to Bai Dan. You can find more eggs in the future, Duo Kang joked. The child actually took it seriously. He was thinking about changing his name with his family. Speaking of eggs, Xiao Xian, go and see that green duck later, Duo Kong said. That fat green duck. Xiao Xian was surprised, what's wrong with it? If it could attract new female ducks, then the fat duck should be fine. Duo Kong clicked his tongue and didn't explain, you'll know when you see it. It's in the duck shed at the foot of the mountain. The shed you guys built for it. After crossing the river and entering the tribe, Xiao Xian put Baigua down. He didn't rush up the mountain. Instead, he walked towards the duck shed. He noticed that while he was gone, another row of duck sheds had been built at the foot of the mountain near the river. There were ducks of different colors moving around inside. He walked into the shed that was built for the green duck. Other than the small door for it, the door for humans seemed to have not been touched in a while. It was covered in a layer of dust. As soon as he opened the door, Xiao Xian felt a murderous aura coming towards him. It wasn't strong, but it was obvious. It was more like a threat. However, the murderous aura quickly disappeared. Xiao Xian looked over. In the nest made of hay, the fat green duck was squatting there. Its wings were spread open as if it was trying to hide something. However, there were too many things under its wings and it couldn't cover them all. From the small part that was exposed, Xiao Xian knew that there were duck eggs under its wings. This duck was incubating eggs. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.